All right. So, looks like we are live. I'm actually pushed this surprise to the left real quick and getting this thing started a little soon. I got about 2.5 hours that we can do this. So, for those who are going to show up, a little bit later at the established 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm still going to be around for you guys. Feel free any questions that you want. Miss Texas and I got a lot of things done today and just been kind of cruising. So what's up, Bowman? Hello. If you can do me a favor or anyone else here, just let me know how the audio is. I'm always weird about that. It's kind of a little bit of a ghetto setup for now. Got some things in the mix of actually trying to get some real camera equipment, maybe lease out a studio, depending on where this goes in the future. But for now, it's going to be a little bit ghetto. So I appreciate you guys kind of working with that. What's up, FCOD? How we doing? Thank you. Actually, you're going to like the video that's dropping tomorrow. Why are guns so scary? Oh, that's my Afghan platoon medic. Doc Hewitt, Win. What's up, dude? Good to have you here. I actually give you kind of a shout out in the video that's going to drop tomorrow. We did post-production on it. It's my 2020 Jumanji year loadout. Talking about the things that I have on hand in this year, especially. Let's see. Yes, the 1911 is back. So the mil spec, the custom mil spec that you guys have seen in the channel over the years. And that finally came back from Cerakoting. We have a dude who picks up and drops off every week in the shop. So I'll take apart the guns. He'll pick them up to Cerakote them. And then he'll bring them back. I'll put them back together. So, he kind of did me a favor, like, hey, no rush, no priority, but I have this 1911 that's been coated or, had a finish on it 3 times at this point. I've carried it everywhere, used it everywhere, carried it for years. And it's kind of a time for a re-up for rust prevention and to make it not look like hell. Cool. So he probably had it about 3 or 4 weeks. So it is finally back. Put it back together and test fired, put the sights back on it, made sure it's all good. So yeah, the 1911 is back, especially with the ammo apocalypse right now. You guys are going to see there's going to be a video that's going to drop tomorrow, kind of talking in detail about it. But yeah, 1911 is back, especially in a time when you cannot carry gun caliber. So it is back. Let's see. I would like the 1911 without the grip safety. That would be cool. So Bowman, I remember seeing for years, we had some old school guys. The easiest technique, like circa the late 80s, early 90s, was to take electrical tape or bike tire inner tube or rubber bands and basically just tape down the grip safety on a 1911. For those who were more inclined, especially on, 70s and 80s era race guns, they would actually have the grip safety pinned down to the frame so it doesn't even move at all. Others who mechanically understand guns, I'm not really going to describe how, but it's pretty relatively easy to deactivate the function of the grip safety where it still floats in and out, but it doesn't serve any purpose. It's just kind of there. I would honestly not recommend that on a single action exposed hammer manual safety firearm such as the 1911. The grip safety was kind of one of those inherent safeties on the gun from John Browning. And internally how that gun works, you really want the half cock and you really want the grip safety, says me. With a modern beaver tail speed bump grip safety, you even think about touching it, grip safety's gone, and the gun is active. Kind of no reason to deactivate it. I don't know I'm a apprentice gunsmith, experienced armor, school trained, and that's what I do as a trade on the civilian side. But I don't think I know better than John Browning. And looking at that gun internally, the grip safety is definitely here to stay, at least on my 1911s. So I don't want to sound like I'm hating. I'm just saying mechanically, you want a half cock and you want a grip safety on that kind of gun. It's almost like taking out the trigger dingus on a Glock, like the bladed safety portion of the trigger on a Glock, taking that out of a Glock and just running it. It's like, nah, you probably want that. That's how the gun was designed. Like, you probably want to keep that. But I guess that's kind of a side note. Let's see. FCOD, your 1911 video from, let me grab my glasses. That looks like a 6 years ago or whatever got me inspired. And since I've built 3 Springfields and 3 80%ers. That's good, man. So, for those who don't know, I mean, a 1911, probably the worst thing you could ever do is move from a Glock or an AR-15 and then decide you want to build or modify or mess with 1911s. The 1911 is not that kind of plug and play platform. There's a lot of hand fitting. There's a lot of special tooling. There's a lot of special stuff that you may want to have on hand, and some books. Jerry Kuhnhausen's Shop Manual 1 and 2. Halleck's 45, classic old school book. That was the first book I was ever given working on 1911 years ago. Everything, pretty much everything, up to and including even a mainspring housing pin going into the frame, pretty much almost everything needs to be hand fit on that gun. So if you start life messing with Glocks or AR-15s, like, oh, I'm going to build 1911, it's not the same thing, especially if you're in the 80% realm, which is cool. That's pretty awesome. So FCOD, you've definitely seen that for sure. We got Tempest, aka US Patriot, in here. That's awesome. I actually leaned quite a lot from your video on the different types of handguns you uploaded a while ago. Thanks. If I had to venture a guess, it could be condition of carry, maybe, where I showcased a revolver, a double single action pistol, and a safe action striker fired pistol. And then also the 1911 exposed hammer single action only manual safety gun, and demonstrated with snap caps like, hey, for those who don't know, these are the different types of handguns or pistols that most people these days are carrying. And from what I've seen in the shop, not a lot of people really understand what the hell they're supposed to do in terms of how to carry these guns and how they were meant to be carried. So in that video, I think I probably slaughtered a couple sacred cows for some boomers or people who just don't know. But yeah, carrying with a round in the chamber. If it's a revolver, carrying with the full cylinder. If it's a 1911 round in the chamber, hammer is cocked, weapons on safe, and it's holstered, and that's how it lives all day. If it's a Glock, an XD, M&P 320, there's a round in the chamber and it's just hanging out in the holster. I guess, unfortunately, I see a lot of people that don't carry with a round in the chamber. I mean, concealed carry is honestly a journey. When I first started, like a decade ago, concealed carrying with my first concealed carry permit in the state I was living in, and at that time, carrying with a round in the chamber was, it took time to work up to that and really understand how the gun works, put the reps in, make it happen. I guess kind of from a selfish standpoint, it's nice when customers completely dissolve gun shop etiquette and just pull out their carry gun out of their holster all of a sudden. They're like, oh, well, this is the gun. It's like, oh. And then you're happy to find out that they are all kinds of messed up and they don't have a round in the chamber. But yeah, that's I guess kind of a side tangent on that. Let's see. I hear a lot of people who are gun owners dislike pistols because they are used in the most crimes. Could someone grow up not liking pistol, or is that rare? It's kind of an interesting point, Bowman. So, what I have found very weird over the years between working a gun counter at a Cabela's, working at a gun range, gun shop in California, working at Ready Gunner in Utah here, it's kind of interesting that I have encountered, and it's not rare, it'll happen every now and then, but I will encounter people who always grew up hunting, shooting trap, skeet, five stand, rifles and shotguns were common. Daddy's gun was next to the door, hunting with dad or grandpa, and they were shooting, Model 700s or Model 70s or Ruger Hawkeyes. They were shooting Red Labels and 870s and, you name it. And rifles and shotguns were absolutely no big deal. And by rifles, I mean, bolt actions, maybe a Mini 14. I'm not talking about AKs or ARs, but rifles and shotguns, that was their bread and butter, like forever. And then the second you bring out a pistol or a handgun, they're like, "Oh no, we never had a handgun in the house. That's a bridge too far." All of a sudden, and it's like your 300 Win Mag elk rifle is not as powerful as this 9mm Glock 19. Like, I don't understand. Like, oh well, that's what the gangsters use. That's what the criminals use. And I'm like, I don't, back up for a second, Bill Ruger. Like, let's calm down. But I've never understood why, for some people who have been raised around guns and hunting and shooting, rifles and shotguns were no big deal. But the second you bring out an AR-15 or a semi-automatic pistol, all of a sudden it's the end of the world. I'm like, I don't understand what that's about. And maybe someone in the comments could kind of key me in on that. Not sure. Let's see. I always had wondered why the police never issued the 1911 en masse 100 years ago until I watched it. Yeah, I have had the fortune to know a couple old school cops. One of them is older guy, worked with the Cabela's years ago on the gun counter, and he was Las Vegas PD. Like his second day on the job, he got in a pretty big shootout in Henderson, and the service pistol at the time was a Smith & Wesson 38, and the service ammunition was like full lead, really soft, like you could write on a piece of paper with the tip of these projectiles. And his partner, who was supposed to be teaching him how to be a cop, got totally fucking smoked. And it was up to him, and he grabbed his partner, who was an experienced cop he was learning from, always kept a 1911 under the front seat. So he just grabbed that shit and started plowing through the windshield and killed the guy who killed his partner, who he was learning from. I remember back in LA, the LAPD SWAT, the Special Investigative Service, the CIS, LAPD CIS, they carried 1911s, but it's not something I would recommend. It's really not. Delta, CAG, unit guys, there's STI 9mm custom 1911s out there overseas, Texas Rangers, law enforcement. There's kind of a time and place for it, but as a general issue, military or police sidearm, I would not recommend the 1911. I just wouldn't, especially when it comes time to replace broken parts, service the guns. It's just not something I would recommend by and large. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Do you watch any political channels like Ben Shapiro, Tim Pool? So I do watch Ben Shapiro, a little bit of Steve Crowder. I'm a huge Joe Rogan Experience podcast fan. Definitely got to have background music, or usually a podcast as background music while I'm working on all kinds of guns, from MG42, HK MP7 to an old Browning A5 that walked in the gun shop yesterday to, I mean, you name it. I work on old stuff, new stuff, a lot of things. And background music is pretty awesome, or background noise. Usually it's Joe Rogan. I'll put on Ben Shapiro. Just to try to be impartial, I'll still look at CNN and even, yes, Rachel Maddow. Just absolute, whether it's trash or whether I'm actually into it. Background music to at least get the full kind of spectrum. Speaking of Ben Shapiro, whether you like him or not, I think he is probably one of the top 3 or one of the best modern debaters and intellectual minds when it comes to the debate arena that we actually have right now on the planet. The dude is like a million words a minute and is thinking like 3 steps ahead of any kind of physical or at least verbal debate altercation he's going to find himself in. So I like to listen to everything, but it's a lot of Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro. I'll listen to other stuff too. I'm trying to get perspective, at least to know what my political opponents are listening to. And I guess in the words of Ben Shapiro, like, I am a very fervent Second Amendment dude. Obviously, you guys have been watching for a while, you know that. But I could honestly argue or debate gun control better than any gun control opponents that I'll ever encounter. And that's kind of taking a page from the Ben Shapiro playbook of knowing your opponent's stance and being able to better argue it than even they can. They stand no chance at winning. These are things I take from that, but yeah, I do listen to Ben Shapiro here and there. Joe Rogan podcast, pretty big time. Every single episode, I'll listen to it. He has a lot of interesting people on. So yeah, let's keep moving on that. What do you think about Palmer lowers in the in range? Oh boy. It's a shame that I don't have Range Chris here. Because we talk about this a lot. So from Sabian 2124, what do you think about Palmer lowers in the in range TV? What would Stoner do rifle? I think if there's one argument I'd like to make about in-range TV with Ian and Carl working on the What Would Stoner Do rifle, and now they're actually going to production, being distributed by Brownells. Step one is they did something really impressive. 2 YouTubers, 2 guys that kind of came up with their own plan, did their own thing, and now, a couple of years later, they have KE Arms making their guns. They have Brownells distributing them, and they actually came out with something solid. I find that very respectable and very impressive. Now, being an infantryman and seeing what happens to weapons that are issued in military service, issued to combat arms, Cav Scouts, artillery, infantry, being, through all these high firing schedules, pre-deployment ranges and workups, getting dropped all the time, getting rusted, getting absolutely trashed and neglected. Maintenance is not necessarily happening when it should. Snuffy is going to completely trash the gun without even knowing it, or just mess up. It's going to get run over. It's going to get dropped. It's going to get scraped and thrown in the back of a truck, and it's going to go through thousands of rounds a year. I definitely have my doubts about an all polymer lower. The polymer lowers previous to that exist on the market, the Bushmaster Carbon 15, some of them that have been reinforced with aluminum inserts. I think that's great as a hobby AR-15. That's great for what we'll call an anorexic build, where you are trying to shave every ounce of weight you physically can and try to end up with like a 5.5 pound AR and, bring it to the range every now and again and show it off. Like, look how cool this is. but something that's going to put up with the use and abuse over decades of military service being issued to dozens of dudes and just being trashed. I don't see it being a long-term durability thing. For the structural integrity of the design, from what I understand, they had to go with the two halves that they fused together, and it has a fixed A1 length of pole kind of fixed buttstock. It has, here's your pistol grip and this is what you got kind of thing. One of the more useful things about the AR-15 is you typically would have an adjustable 6-position buttstock that you can, change whatever stock you want to put on there, whether it's a Mission First Tactical or my favorite, something from Magpul or a B5 SOP mod stock. You can adjust that length of pole if you have body armor, winter jackets, longer, longer arms, a bigger stature person versus a smaller person. You can change from the standard A2 pistol grip with a very slanted angle to like a Magpul K2 pistol grip or something more vertical. Lots of modularity and customization there. And when you go to a polymer lower that has a fixed stock and a fixed pistol grip, you kind of cut the legs off from what we get to enjoy from an AR-15. And with a red dot, with some kind of competent weapon light, I could probably get the gun down to like 6.5 to 7 pounds using aluminum receivers and the usual stuff. And even if it was 10 pounds, I don't see that being, and I'm biased because, I used to be a 240 dismounted machine gunner, especially my first deployment. So when I stopped doing that and actually got an M4 again, it was like, dude, this is easy. This is lightweight. Like, come on, dude. So I don't know. There's times as an infantryman, I wished procurement or, the bean counters or whoever was testing and deciding to adopt our equipment, that they kept us, the infantrymen, especially the reconnaissance infantrymen, us and the reconnaissance community, where we're going to be packing this shit for like a 20K movement over 2 days. I wish they would care more about weight, but at the same time, being as lightweight as possible, but taking on some concerns about long-term longevity in terms of durability. I don't know about that. So I guess all things said, with the What Would Stoner Do project, I would actually like to rename it to Let's Make the AR-15 as Lightweight as Possible project, because I don't think that's what Eugene Stoner would have done with the AR-15. I just don't. Especially after you look at what he did on the SR-25 with Reed Knight, Knight's armament. I don't think he would have gone that way. Again, I'm respectful of what they did. I'm appreciative that they were able to bring something to market, and 2 guys on YouTube doing their own project, and look where they are now, and it's awesome. But as a long-term service rifle being used by glue sniffers like us, I don't think it's necessarily going to hold up as well over many years of just being absolutely battered and abused. So that's, I guess, I just kind of wish they would rename the project. I guess, long story short. Okay, let's keep going. You carry a pistol for the unexpected, but if you know you are about to get into a fight, you should bring rifles and shotguns. So 2 reactions. One is a video is going to drop tomorrow that I think you're going to be interested in, that echoes that. Thing number 2 is honestly, I'm not a big shotgun dude, not about shotguns, not even a little bit. If I'm doing trap, skeet, 5-stand, sporting clays, hunting ducks or waterfowl, of course it's going to be a shotgun. That's what you want. But for defense, actually saving your ass in a lethal, imminent, short-range encounter, where's the rifle, bro? Let's not do a pump action mandatory 2-handed stout recoil. Reloads are a fucking nightmare. No. If I now, this would change legally if I'm living in New York or Amsterdam or Europe or some place where I cannot procure an AR-15, M1 carbine, Mini 14, AK, SKS. If I'm legally not able to procure that or legally have it and use it, that's one thing. But in the United States, in a free state where I can easily have ARs, AKs, you name it, the shotgun's going to be for recreation and sport and hunting. It's not going to be for defense, like not even a little bit. And that's kind of a side note. Let's see. What is your opinion on smoothbore flintlocks? Are they still viable, or are they just used for nostalgic purposes and to reflect on a bygone era in firearm technology? That's from Roddyman87. I would not be using a smoothbore flintlock musket, something like an old school 18th century Enfield or Brown Bess, or something that has no rifling, and that musket ball is just bouncing around the bore until it flies out somewhere. If you want to do some reenacting, you want to have a cool, legitimately awesome piece of history or modern reproduction. Maybe you have, muzzle loader, black powder hunting season for your state. That is cool. But if I actually want to hit stuff and not die, no, I think it's cool as a hobby. It's cool for black powder season if you want to go there. And even then, I would use some kind of rifled Manet round, something where I can actually guarantee where my bullet is going past 50 yards. But in terms of modern defense, I would not, I just wouldn't. Absolutely not in 2020, dude. When least common denominator out there is going to be running around with a Glock 22 they bought out of someone's trunk, or an AR-15 or an AK or something like that. Virtually any criminal or someone busting into your house or anything happening, they are going to have far more superior weaponry than you would have. So I would not use a flintlock smoothbore musket unless it's recreation, it's a hobby, maybe black powder season for hunting. Other than that, not for actual defense. Absolutely not, unless I'm living in some European country where I can't have modern stuff and that's all I can have. Well, obviously that's what I'm going to use, and I'm not going to be real happy about it. But no. Let's see. Can you modify full auto weapons to fire faster than they standardly do? For example, can you make an M16 fire faster than 900 rounds per minute? You can, to an extent. It depends on the firearm design. Vietnam is a good example with the original M16 using ball powder from the Ordnance Department, using the wrong ammunition for the gun. It drastically amped up the cyclic rate. But in the case of the early Vietnam M16, when they were still making those mistakes, the consequence of that was torn rims off cases, broken shells, guns jamming, horrible things happening. So it's not going to be as practical. And honestly, having a severe rate of fire is not necessarily what you want to do if it's a handheld carbine or even a medium, multi-purpose machine gun like a 240. The 240 started about there, and it used to have an adjustable gas plug, and now it has a hydraulic buffer with a fixed gas plug, doing about 650 rounds a minute. At a certain point, you're just wasting ammo unless it's like old school MG42. Like the MG42 we have shoots 1,600 rounds a minute. But that gun that's what the German army at the time wanted, and they were using it, in this crazy tripod thing, doing severe area fire kind of stuff. There's ways to do it to an extent before you start risking parts failure or the gun is just not going to work the way you need it to. I would look at, if you want to go down the rabbit hole on that kind of topic, I would look at the Stinger 30 cal 1919 machine gun they made in World War II, where they were putting washers on the spring and the drive rod to make it reciprocate faster than normal. But then again, there was kind of an aviation purpose that was used towards the ground. You have a lot of in the era before they brought the Gatling gun back and did 134s and onboard multiple barrel Gatling gun kind of concepts on aircraft. They were trying to amp up the cyclic rate as fast as the gun would physically allow without blowing up or causing problems. There's ways to do it, but honestly, from a ground fighting perspective, that's not necessarily what you want. Usually the times you've seen machine guns modified or purposely built to have a very high rate of fire with a single barrel, usually it's an aviation kind of context or usage. And it's not something most countries, militaries have been really interested in for ground fighting. Let's see. I'm actually surprised I haven't heard gun control groups come after exploding targets. Some people talk about Tannerite. At least once a year, somebody gets killed or starts a fire with it, and it's pretty dumb. Silly question. What do you think about flamethrowers? Ironically, there aren't many federal laws regarding them. You can have one delivered to your home right now. Pretty powerful ones too. So we actually have a flamethrower at work. Maybe once a year we might do a film shoot with it. It's not a Tesla. It's not from the Boring Company. It's one of those old like M2 flamethrowers. I would not want to fight an enemy on the battlefield that has flamethrowers, and I would not want to have flamethrowers in my inventory. So I don't know. I think in the modern era, it's kind of a toy. But most flamethrowers I've seen these days just make kind of a stream of flame. But really what you're trying to do historically on a battlefield military context with the flamethrowers have a burning jelly kind of material that shoots flaming stuff at a target and just sits there and burns. So most flamethrowers these days are not historically what militaries or combat has used with flamethrowers. Have usually had a pretty short flame time. There's only so much fuel that you can carry on your back. World War II, we had the Sherman Firefly and tank mounted delivery systems with extra jelly and fuel tanks on the back to spray that shit like 100 or 200 meters onto a bunker, and it just sits there and burns. But it's not something I don't know. It's kind of a toy. Let's see, from Doc Wynn. What are your views on magnified optics like ACOGs or variable zooms on an AR? So there was a time when the ACOG was kind of the best idea. Early global war on terror, before we had kind of the usage or advent of low power variable optics, the fixed 4x32 ACOG was kind of a cool thing. And I think the Pentagon or the generals in the Army and the Marines were excited about it because it greatly increased qualification scores for soldiers and Marines using it. It allowed you to see, at least 4 power to better identify what it is you're dealing with and what kind of shot we can make. An ACOG goes out to 600 meters from its basic stadia, whether it's on an M4 or an M16. Some of them, like the T831, it has the ranging reticles. So on the left and right, you have, I believe it was 10 mils in chunks on each side to the left and right. So you could call for fire, range estimate, relay information to others next to you or on comms who have the same reticle you do, and they're seeing what you see. That was cool. But when you start looking at things like the Elcan Spectre that went from 1 power to 4 power, that was it. Quick little switch on the left side. You started to see a need or a desire to have something that had some kind of ability for the user to decide what they actually need. These days, fast forward to now, pretty much the primary thing everybody is running is some kind of low power variable optic, whether it's a 1-4, 1-6, 1-8, maybe 1-10, Vortex Razor, you name it. There's a bunch of them out there. If I could only have one optic on an AR trying to do as much as possible, it would not be the ACOG. It would be a low power variable optic without a front sight base, because if you have that front sight post on your AR, a 0 to 1 power magnification optic of any kind it's going to present challenges. So it needs to be a free floated rail, no fixed front sight. It needs to, to be something that's got flip up iron sights, but you're actually able to deal with the parallax and use it properly. Unless, getting back to the question from Doc Wynn, unless you have some nostalgia factor, and I own an ACOG for that reason, nostalgia. But unless you're trying to do a clone build of what you were issued, or you want to have, a collection of U.S. service rifles throughout the eras, an ACOG has to be there. But if we're actually really trying to be as effective as we can be with our purchasing dollars to acquire the best equipment, it really should not be an ACOG. I would want variable zoom, and I would want to be able to go from 0 mag to 1 power to 6 to 8, and I wouldn't want to be stuck with a 4x32 ACOG that, that thing is like a million pounds. It's forged aluminum, very rugged, but it's heavy. And the eye relief, at least on a 4-power ACOG, is very short. So like you literally need to get your nose up on the charging handle and then some to properly sight through an ACOG. I would just do a low power variable optic if we're actually trying to be practical. Unless you're going for nostalgia, then sure, go for the ACOG and have fun with it. But it would not be my first choice for purchasing dollars, trying to get the best equipment possible in today's day and age. Let's see. You said you're not a fan of shotguns for defense. Does that include home defense? Problem I have where I live is the concern of a rifle round over penetrating or missing and going through a wall. Yeah, so that would include home defense. If you were to take double-aught, buckshot, 9 or 8 pellet and fire it at a wall in your home versus a 55 grain open tip hollow match round out of a 5.56 and shoot it there, you might be surprised what penetrates further, I guess is all I'm going to say about that. There are some plans, Range Chris and I have been talking about building up some mock walls with insulation wiring, drywall studs, and building up like 3 mock walls and then shooting 9mm, 5.56, 12 gauge and letting it happen. And you guys might actually be surprised what you might find. Shotgun over penetrating, that's going to be a much larger concern than a high velocity, lightweight, small diameter projectile like a 5.56. So if you're worried about over penetration, I would stay the hell away from a shotgun. But future videos, we're going to show that, because most people haven't shot through things or shot at people with things or actually done that kind of testing. So if you're worried about over-penetration, though, the shotgun, I would not pick it up unless you plan on using like number 6 birdshot or something, which I would not recommend for defense. So that's stay tuned for that. These are good questions, though. Let's see. The BAR had, get back to that. BAR had adjustable ROF2, I think, accomplishes by turning a gas knob. So the BAR had adjustable rate of fire too, accomplished by turning a gas knob. So it did have an adjustable rate of fire on some models, like the Danish one, the 1918A2. It was not done through a gas knob. It was actually done through the genius of John Browning. And John Moses Browning actually had a selector from safe to slow and then fast. That was actually done through the selector lever, and there was an interrupter inside the receiver that would make that happen. So it was not a gas knob or a gas regulator like the old school 240 Bravo. But yes, that is true. Some models of the BAR did have an adjustable rate of fire. Let's see. I suppose I understand your position on shotguns, but they still have a special place in my heart. You can get good magazine-fed shotguns like a Saiga 12 and others. It's quite a lot of firepower. Yeah, a magazine fed shotgun. I would not be interested in that at all. Like not even a little bit. To each his own. Um, if I'm doing a semi-auto shotgun, it's going to be a Benelli M4, a Mossberg 930 or 940, something like that. It's not going to take a magazine. It's just not. Um, let's see. I carry a minigun as my concealed carry. What's your thoughts on that? I guess, I'm going to wonder if you're an extra in the Predator movie from the 80s. You have a 134 with a backpack that has probably like 300 rounds. It's awesome. Let's see. Should have specified the smoothbore as small to large game harvesting, especially in 2020 ammo land. I can at least find flints and black powder. Okay, so going back to Ronnie Man 87, that is a unique factor dealing with the ammo apocalypse, which there's going to be a little bit of that discussed, actually quite a lot on the video that's going to drop tomorrow. I actually know one guy who is a severe, hardcore black powder kind of dude. And this guy, and if you actually think about it, if you have a flintlock musket, whether it's rifled or not, depending on how committed you are, you have something that legally is pretty much good to go anywhere. If you're really committed, you can make your own bullets and melt down your own lead and cast it and do your own thing. But like I said, I know one guy who is super serious about black powder that he even makes his own black powder and stocks up on just a whole bunch of flints for his frizzen and everything like that. So if you really want it to be dedicated as to having some kind of firearm that you can make the powder and the projectiles and have the flint on hand to keep this thing going, that would be one way to go. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of science. That's a lot of dedication. And some of that is a little bit dangerous. Actual black powder. I'm not going to go over the chemical composition of it. Might get banned from YouTube or something. But actual black powder is not very stable. It's not very safe to produce, and it's not very safe to keep, at least original black powder, not Pyrodex and stuff you find today. Smelting down your own lead and casting your own bullets, the lead exposure and inhalation, burns, everything. There's a lot of risk and there's a lot of danger, but if you are committed and you have some money to buy all that stuff and you really care, you could be in a position to make your own powder, have your own flint for everything, and make your own projectiles if you really wanted to. So, I mean, that is kind of an interesting side note. For me, at least, it's easier to stock up on thousands of rounds of 5.56 and 9mm and everything I like during normal times. So in times like these, I can continue to train, kind of ripping into my stockpile a little bit. A lot better to do that than get into that. But I don't, shit on the guys who do it. It's just not something I have the time for. Let's see. In your opinion, what is the smallest caliber you are comfortable using to defend yourself? I mean, I could get shit down with a 22 long rifle if I had to. It's not something I would do willingly, but if it's all I had, I'm still going to get results. I think the best gun in the world is the gun you actually have or have on you if it's concealed carry. You're confident and comfortable with, you're competent with. You can handle the recoil. You know how the gun works. You know how the sights are. You know how to make things happen. If it's a 22, not ideal, but hey, if you are outstanding with it, I don't care about shooting fast. I don't care about shooting the most powerful thing in the world. I care about shooting well. And if somebody is shooting well, even with the 22, that's really where it's at. Is what I would say. But there's going to be a little bit of that touched into on the video I'm dropping tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Let's see. If the rule of law led you to this, of what good was the rule? Let's see. Marvin the Boon, if you can, gonna need a little bit more clarification on that. If the rule of law led you to this, of what good was the rule? It sounds like a little bit of Thoreau mixed in with Voltaire, but if you could specify, that would be great. Let's see. George Washington, 32 cal preferably, and a 327. That might be referring to a previous discussion or comment. I know a dude who carries the 327 Magnum, a little bit antiquated these days with a wheel gun, but man, I've seen that guy shoot, and I would not want to be in a gunfight with that dude. 327 will definitely let you know what is up if you're on the wrong side of it. Let's see. Were the founders of our country inventors? I heard that Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were highly intelligent. I heard that Jefferson loved guns too. So yes, a number of them were. I mean, of course, historically, Benjamin Franklin was messing with electricity. Maybe not necessarily doing the kite with the key and, putting magic in a bottle kind of thing, but he was messing with electricity. More of a statesman, spent a lot of time in France. Thomas Jefferson was probably one of the more intellectual members of the Founding Fathers. His house at Monticello, which is still there as a museum, was kind of ahead of its time. It was also kind of weird. He had a dome ceiling, grass on the front yard or on the front porch and everything. It was different, but he had a lot of literature. He was well studied and eventually Secretary of State and everything. He was well traveled. And in fact, he donated just a portion of his personal library to help fund UVA, the University of Virginia. So our founding fathers definitely spent some time learning a lot, doing music, inventions, the sciences, the awakening, or, the Enlightenment, everything, studying. So, there was a lot of interesting personnel as part of our founding fathers. And, some of them were dudes getting drunk, fighting bar fights and rousing up the town. Some of them were deep intellectuals. Some of them had some kind of military past, like George Washington. They all, they didn't have it all together, but together it seemed like they had it all. So let's see. George Washington, I prefer my A4 builds fed with M193 myself. It's interesting you say that because, again, I keep referring to this video tomorrow, but I actually talk about M193. That's 5.56, 55 grain, full metal jacket. If you're pumping that out of a 16-inch or plus, or the 20-inch M16 barrel, if you're pumping it out of a barrel of that length, the 193 is not something to mess around with. It does have some penetration value, definitely has some tumbling issues that show up when it's pumped at that kind of velocity. Out of an 18 or 20-inch barrel, 193 is not something you would want to deal with. But I actually do talk about 193 versus M855 green tip. I didn't really go into the weeds of why I hate green tip, but 193 is my preferred round for 5.56. If I can't get my hands on the Mark 262, 77 grain, open tip match, Black Hills, IMI Razor Core, clone load, things like that. It still boggles my mind that people try to argue that the Second Amendment wasn't meant for the people. It's, it's going to be what it's going to be. It's amazing. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom to exercise and be free from religion. All of those things are individual. The Third Amendment, troops being forced to live in your house and you have to pay for that and house them. That's individual for you and your house. The Fourth Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth, unreasonable search and seizure, right to not testify as a witness against yourself, everything else. These are all identified easily as individual rights, but somehow for some people, the Second Amendment, I guess they refer to the militia part of it to refer to something from, I think it was 1902, the Militia Act, in terms of the National Guard, that somehow the Second Amendment just, gives rights to the federal government and some alternative universe that people subscribe to. Yeah, it's they're going to bend and twist whatever, or honestly misinterpret it or not really understand it of why it was written and who wrote it and why. Um, but yes, the Bill of Rights is a very individual kind of thing. That's not granting rights or privileges to the government. That's enshrining rights that we already have, that are not authorized or issued or given out by government. These are just things that our founders enshrined. That's kind of a separate side note of the controversy of, between our founding fathers, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, of should we even include a Bill of Rights, or not. And there was different reasons behind that. But yes, it was a very individual kind of thing. Let's see. What's your preferred barrel length for an AR pistol? It depends on caliber. If we're talking 5.56 or 223 Wild, I would really, really not go less than 11 and a half, preferably 12 and a half inch barrel. 5.56 is a very velocity dependent cartridge. Kind of the secret sauce to terminal ballistics on 5.56 is barrel length, pumping it up to the velocity needed to produce the crazy results you get. If it's 300 blackout, we can do 8 or 9 inches and be just fine, with the understanding realistically we're not going to want to do much past 100 yards maybe with it. There's guys who like to just test their limits and just kind of mess around, and I've seen 300 blackout AR pistols going out to 600 yards. Out of a 30 round magazine or 25 round magazine, they're going to get, maybe 7 hits. That's great. Cool. But if it's going to be 5.56 for an AR pistol or SBR, I would really not go below 11 and a half at just the absolute shortest ever. I would really not go below 10 and a half, but every inch you can go beyond that, the better. 11 and a half, preferably 12 and a half is what I would do or recommend. See, 52 grain. I got to put these back on. 52 grain TSX is also excellent. Yeah, there's lots of ballistic testing and everything else. Ultimately, even if it was like a 7.5 inch AR barrel with green tip, like, you would not want to get hit with that. But there's certainly things we can do to help or hurt ourselves here. Let's see. I hope that one day we will be able to find the brown tip ammo in a store somewhere. It's okay. I don't know. I don't personally have a use at the moment for, disabling vehicles or, shooting through multiple low Benelli hardness steel and whatever. Accuracy is kind of something I'm about. Brown tip is not going to give you that like at all. But then again, it's a service load. So 4 inches at 100 yards, good to go. Most of us want better than that. And most of us can do better than that. So, yeah, brown tip. If it was available in stores, yeah, I'd buy some. But I'm not really a priority. Let's see. I'm going to take a little sip of cherry cola here. Thanks for answering my questions. I like to get the opinions from other people in the gun world. I have an SBR Draco and Brownell's XM177 that gets shit done. Dude, the XM177, I had a buddy back at Fort Polk, Louisiana, right before I got out. He got one. And just holding that thing, handling it. I know Brownell's, I think they extended the barrel, and then the somewhat quasi-suppressor compensator thing is not real for the Brownell's one. I think it's pinned and welded to make it a rifle, but you can mess with it. But just holding that thing, it was like, dude, this is what the AR-15 always should have been. It should have been just lightweight, handy, 20 or 30 rounds, select fire, ready to go. Just, not a 12-pound wood and steel battle rifle, kind of crazy recoil, uncontrollable and full auto kind of thing. Like, this is literally something you can run through the jungle with. Fries operations, airborne operations, anything that where weight is a significant issue and you want to carry more rounds, and the gun you have is going to be lightweight, handy, compact, good to go. XM177, I'm pretty impressed. Anytime I get to hold or shoot one, they're pretty outstanding. That's on the get list someday as a Brownells 177 or a GA 5 would be cool. But yeah, that's awesome. My father's concealed carries a Ruger, Bird's Head, and 45 Colt religiously, to each their own, I suppose. Yeah, I definitely, probably the only thing worse than a shotgun for self-defense in my eyes would be a single action Army pattern kind of gun. Ruger Vaquero, Uberti 1873, anything that you have to manually cock the hammer. Now, back in the 1870s, that was the shit. That was awesome. Having self-contained black powder cartridges, at least by those standards at that time, being able to quickly unload and reload, not having to actually, pack in the black powder and the musket ball with percussion caps and do the cap and ball kind of thing. The 1873, the single action Army was, at that time, that was legit. And that's what you wanted. Not as many people at that time had the money to actually buy one or carry one, but that if you could and you could afford it, that was the thing, man. Fast forward to 2020. No, dude, so, I mean, I can't, it's what he does and it's what's going on. But if we're even going to carry a revolver today, it absolutely would have to be a double action revolver. But yeah, to each his own, I guess, like you said it. I just, there's a lot of people that have died next to a loaded, perfectly serviceable single action revolver, and they did not have time to cock the hammer. They didn't even cock the hammer. They're just pulling the trigger. They're not putting the reps in. Yeah. Let's see. I actually heard one argument that the Second Amendment was only put in place to help slave owners put down slave rebellions. I think it is just an attempt to brand the Second Amendment as racist or something. The ironic thing, if you actually look at the history of gun control, at least in the 20th century, we might be able to see who is actually pulling the race card and actually being racist there. And that's not something I say lightly. But, moving past Jim Crow into our 20th century, looking at who they were targeting with some of the original gun control stuff back then, it's not a good story, not a good time. And actually, one of my buddies, Baxter, he's an attorney in Virginia, but he wrote for one of his thesis papers, really deep diving into the history of modern American gun control. And it's not a history that gun control advocates really want to talk about. Let's put it that way. Let's see. Do muzzle devices have to be aligned perfectly, or they can be offset a little? So I guess there's two ways to answer that. One is we're talking about the concentric nature of the threads in the barrel and the muzzle device in question. So if I'm interested in suppressing an AR, for example, I'm going to be interested in not using a crush washer. I'm going to use peel washers with Roxette, time it, torque it, get it timed right, to make sure that it's concentric, because when I put that suppressor on, I don't want baffle strikes. I don't want any of that stuff going on. I think what you're talking about is probably we're talking about the timing. So basically, you can time a muzzle device for a left-handed or a right-handed shooter, or you can just go with neutral timing, which is usually straight up and down. If you buy a Surefire muzzle device for one of their suppressors, you can see it, you can physically look at it, where if you're primarily right-handed, you can time it kind of offset from the shooting perspective, kind of almost 45 pretty much degrees to the right. It's supposed to help you out a little bit. Probably the biggest demonstration of this is a standard AKM or AK pattern rifle where you see the standard slant break and how it's kind of, the slant is at the 45 and left of the shooter from the shooting perspective. And that's because that gun, an AK with that gas piston and how much steel is flying back and forth, it actually has a pretty violent recoil impulse compared to something inline internal piston like an AR-15. So that is the most visible demonstration of trying to offset the inertia and the effects of the gun. So most people, when a customer wants me to mount a suppressor host device, whether it's a Rugged, it's a Dead Air, it's a Silencer Co., it's a Surefire, Knights Armament, AAC, whatever it is, I'll ask them like, hey, do you want me just to do neutral timing? Do you want left or right-handed? Most of them don't even know that's a thing. And honestly, I'd probably recommend neutral timing. The SWAT law enforcement guys that we deal with, they're going to do shoot houses. They're going to primarily stick to their dominant shoulder, but sometimes they may transition and go to the left shoulder. And if you have a gun with a muzzle device that's timed to cater to a right-hand shooter, but now you're shooting left-handed, now you might start being in a place you don't want to be. So neutral timing is probably what I'd recommend. That's a pretty cool question. Thanks for asking it. Hopefully that kind of was falling in line with what you were asking. Are you branching out into other media sites on the chance that YouTube goes censorship crazy? I have plans that I think I will. For the moment, I'm sticking with YouTube. But we'll see how things go. I do have an Instagram account. If you guys are interested in that, where I post almost daily about some of the jobs I encounter in the gun shop, some guns and things that show up to my workbench. But in terms of a video platform, don't have any plans right now. Full 30 is cool and all, but you have to be invited to go, and I'm not that big of a channel. I'm not like Garand Thumb or Nothing Fancy or In Range TV. So far, just kind of playing by the rules here on YouTube. Not doing anything to try to get canceled. Just live my life and seeing how long I can make it here. But if things look like they're kind of closing in even more than they are now, I'll start looking into different platforms for sure. Let's see. Sabian 2124 is talking about A2 flash hider. Yeah, for an A2 birdcage, I would so there's going to be 5 ports on top and there's going to be no ports on the bottom. For that, you pretty much 100% of the time want to stick to neutral timing. So the flat portion is on the bottom. That's designed for being in the prone and trying to reduce kicking up dust. If it's a little bit off, even 4 to 5 degrees, nobody cares. It's not going to really change anything. You really can't go wrong with an A2 flash hider unless you mount it upside down so the ports are on the bottom. But other than that, standard A2 birdcage with a crush washer, you can't really go wrong, even if it's not totally straight up and down. Nobody cares. It's not really going to change anything. But when we're talking about muzzle devices to host a suppressor, that's when we absolutely care about what's going on. But A2 birdcage, whatever. I don't know what timing means. So that means the muzzle device being so if these are the 5 ports and my middle finger here is kind of the middle port of the A2 birdcage, and let's say I am shooting the gun and this is the muzzle device and you're looking down the wrong end of the gun, you're looking at the muzzle, I can time it. If I'm a right-handed shooter, I could time it this way. And if I'm a left-handed shooter, I would time it that way. And then we have neutral timing is what we call that. So that's all, there's no flash ports on the bottom, and these are the blast ports on the A2 birdcage. For muzzle devices, you can do the same thing, but timing is talking about the angular location of that muzzle device, of how it's actually secured and fixed to the barrel. I guess that's like my half drunken way of trying to describe that. If that makes sense, I hope that kind of helps out a little bit. How long are you going to be streaming today, out of curiosity? I think we probably have definitely at least another hour and a half. Like I said, Miss Texas and we got a lot of stuff done today. So, I like to chunk my day into 20-minute chunks and, wake up like, here's what needs to be done. Here's what has to be accomplished. Here is like the end state for today. These are the things that have to get done. These are the things I'm going to start working on for the next day. And just kind of 20-minute segments. So I've kind of set aside at least another hour and a half to do this. So yeah, just going to be hanging out, and hopefully you guys don't run out of questions, because that would be boring. But yeah, I'm definitely here to hang out. Let's see. I heard if you look in a mirror and say gun control 3 times, Beto O'Rourke comes and takes your guns. Yeah, that's Paranormal Activity. We watched that last night, doing the mirror thing 3 times. I think, Doc, you know what I'm talking about. Beto O'Rourke, as an interesting side note, it was interesting moving into the primaries when Beto was out there and he's like, hell yeah, we're going to take your AR-15s, your AKs, everything like that. I included that in one of my almanacs many months ago. And for some of the super gun control people, they were excited, they were happy, they were jazzed up. Yeah, finally, we're having a politician stand up and say what we want them to say and just come out in the open. But if you took notice when that happened, there was a lot of people on the lefter gun control side of the house that were not very happy with Beto O'Rourke for coming out and actually saying it. Like, dude, like, shut the hell up. Don't, like, it's not good business to come out and just openly say that. You're just giving the conservatives and pro-gun people more ammunition for their argument. Don't really talk about what we want to do in the end. Let's kind of keep that down. And I'm sure there was probably some closed door meetings with that dude, with the DNC leadership and some other people, like, hey, you need to cool it on this whole take your guns thing, because that's not going to play. We don't want to throw that out there. We don't want to scare off, some voters and people in the middle, and definitely give, gas on the fire for pro-gun, conservative, right-leaning people to come and attack us with you out there openly saying what we want to do. We just don't want to say it. So, Beto O'Rourke is not taking a goddamn thing. And for the time that I spent in El Paso, which was his home city, and he was supposed to have a lot of support, I didn't see as many Beto stickers out there. And I got to tell you, that was a city that you would at least expect their hometown politician Beto do, but at least have some stickers here and there. I didn't see a lot. So I think it's just, that dude's a chump. It's not working out. Let's see. Is the AK slant break effective enough to affect timing? So I would probably attempt to rephrase it saying the timing of the AK slant break is relatively effective enough to get the job done, if that makes sense. Certainly better muzzle devices you can put on an AK other than the standard slant break, but the timing of that slant break to the lower left is probably the best you're going to get. But then again, it's an AK. It was designed to replace a submachine gun. It was designed to be simple to use, require little maintenance. Not going to be a lot of training involved. You're going to be some standard conscript who's never really messed with guns your whole life. You get a couple weeks of basic entry, basic level training. Here's an AK. Let's go get results. You are just whatever. So the slant brake, it's kind of a luxury for something like an AK. So yeah, let's see. Are EOTechs worth it? Thinking about picking one up. I think so. It just depends. I don't know. So let's look at comparative options. From EOTech, even today, you would have their Model 512 standard at one time Army issue optic. It's going to take the 2 AA's. It's going to sit absolutely just right there on the top of the receiver. Absolute co-witness. You can get risers for it. Battery life is it's okay. Weight and size kind of big. At one time, it was cool. I don't know. These days, trying to save money, you could look into a Holosun that has a holographic reticle in there. Looking at Aimpoint, their patrol rifle optic. That's one way to go. Vortex Crossfire 2. I don't know. For me, the EOTech is off limits just because I have a pretty heavy astigmatism in my dominant eye. So anytime I look through an EOTech, it's just a grainy, like starscape of stuff. If you have vision that works with an EOTech, especially for nostalgia reasons, it's cool. It's not quite like the ACOG. It's not that obsolescent. Maybe one of the more modern ones that takes CR123 batteries, less space and weight on the rail, maybe a little battery life, a little bit more. Could be something to do, but I don't know. I'm forever pretty much a solid Aimpoint guy, so it would just depend on what is in the budget. An EOTech Model 512, maybe not recent, maybe not the cutting edge at all. A little bit big and heavy on top of the gun, but it's relatively okay on the price. But at that point, I would just grab an Aimpoint patrol rifle optic, some kind of Holosun or Vortex Crossfire, something like that, and just kind of be done with it. So if you're going for nostalgia, sure, absolutely. But if you want to maximize your purchasing power with the money at hand, you have a no shit serious fighting optic. Probably not. Just gonna be honest, and that's coming from a guy. I mean, I owned an EOTech for years, dude. Let's see. What do I think of the M14 rifle? Oh man. Oh. I don't have a lot of good things to say about the M14. Now, when I went to VMI, we had M14s. It was the rifle that I had there for 4 years. We would actually not just do parade and ceremonies. We would actually go out there and qualify with them. So I have a lot of time with M14s. It's kind of sentimental to my heart. And I'd love to have an M1A, the civilian Springfield Armory offering of an M14, just to have for nostalgia reasons, not even a serious priority at all. The M14 has a couple challenges. Challenge number one is it takes a round that I think we should have never adopted. 7.62 NATO, at least in the form of a standard issue rifle, we should have never gone there. I think the British had a pretty outstanding offering with their actual intermediate caliber NATO round that they were doing for trials and everything else. Since we forced the rest of NATO to go with the 7.62 NATO for not just machine guns, but like everything, we should have gone with the FAL. I see that as a better rifle. M14, it was the shortest lived service rifle in our history, and I think that's for a reason. Recoil, I've shot M14s on full auto. It's an absolute just disaster. Not as bad as a SCAR 17 on full auto, but just about is actually probably the same or possibly slightly worse. Not controllable. M14s were issued. They were supposed to replace the BAR, the Thompson, the Grease Gun, the M1 Carbine, the M1 Garand. It was supposed to do everything. And the end result is it didn't really do any specific thing very well. It was just kind of there. I don't like the open action on top. The 20-round mag, more than 8 rounds in an M1, but it's still pretty clunky. Rock and roll magazines. AKs do it too. It's not my favorite. The gun is big, bulky, heavy. You are not in line with the sights with that drop-down comb on the stock. From an angular force vector perspective, that muzzle is just going straight up every time. Takes a lot of training and experience to get remotely okay controlling it on full auto. And in fact, it sucked so bad at that they just would issue them with the selectors removed, like the ones we had where you just can't even do full auto. If I had to choose between an AR-10 or an AR-15 or an FAL, I would pick any of that over an M14. I just not – no, I just don't. Not a big fan of the M14. For nostalgia, it's kind of cool. But actually, like as a issue rifle or something to actually like defend myself and fight with, not something I would recommend. Not my favorite. You can make an M14 very accurate for a time until you start moving down on that headspace. You got the bolt lugs interacting with the receiver. For the money, I would just go with an AR-10. If you want a semi-automatic 6.5 Creedmoor or 308, I would just do an AR-10. 100,000,000% of the day, I would not mess around with an M1A or an M14 at all. No. Buy yourself an M1 Garand and an AR-10 and just be done with it. Don't go down the M14 rabbit hole. Says me. Some guys really love it, and I've met some really like initial early Vietnam dudes who didn't want anything to do with the M16. And again, I understand it, but looking down at brass tacks and what these guns are and how mechanically they work and how they perform, and an M14 is nothing I want to be involved with at all, unless it's nostalgia or just kind of cool as a range toy. But no. DNC is essentially on life support. Craziness that we are seeing is essentially a schismatic movement within the Democratic Party between the far left and moderate Democrats. I think both parties need to do a lot of work. DNC has been moved so far left compared to where it used to be, even like going back to Bill Clinton, like the 90s era. Totally unrecognizable now, but also so is the GOP with the party of Trump and kind of having to toe that line despite how hard they fought to not have him make it back in the primaries in 2015. So I think both parties are kind of in a state of disrepair. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done by both parties to kind of bring themselves back up to speed. Can they do it? I don't know. I guess we will see. What do you think of Larry Vickers' take on the U.S. should adopt some form of AK for standard infantry? As much as I respect Larry Vickers and respect the perspective and, experience and projects he's been involved in and things he does now, I would disagree a little bit. I totally understand where he's coming from, though. If we had AK pattern rifles for standard infantry and only Delta, SEALs, Green Berets, cool guys had M4s or AR-15s, I think we would still be successful. But I don't know. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if we had to go the AKs, the modularity of putting on, PEG 15s, PVS 14 unit in front of an optic, changing out mission essential gear, putting on a PVS 30 night vision on the front of the optic, putting on a bipod, putting this, messing things around, adjustable stuff. The AK doesn't really lend itself well. Maybe back in the 70s and something we could have done that, but in today's day and age, with how the Army is interested in modularity, having a rifle that can be pretty quick and drama-free, easily changed, completely redone, in a matter of minutes, based on who the rifle is issued to, a specific mission or mission set or mission specific gear, or changing things around on the gun from an armorer or maintenance kind of standpoint. I don't see the AK. Pretty much with an AK, when that thing's out, just throw the thing out, just get another one. Versus an AR, you can actually change the barrels, change out bolt carry group, change out the parts. If the Army wants to change calibers to some 6mm range cool guy thing, buy brand new uppers and throw them on the standard lowers you already have. I mean, it's much from a long-term projection modularity standpoint, mission essential gear, changing things on the fly and just going. The AR is going to keep up with that all day, but the AK, there's going to be some limitations there. And I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I that's one place I kind of disagree on. I understand where he's coming from, though. If you want to limit how much time, money, rounds fired, and costs associated with training every single soldier or Marine in combat arms in our military, you could definitely cut the fat from a budget standpoint with AKs. I just don't see it serving us as well as what we get and will continue to get out of an AR-15 that we use today with the military. So that's something I would disagree with, but I don't think we would be at a colossal disadvantage. It's just something I wouldn't want to do. Let's put it that way. That's good though. You saw that video. I can't remember if it was Ian McCollum interviewing him or what video it was, where I think it was with Ian, where he said, yeah, I think the AK would probably be a better thing. Yeah, I'd have to disagree with that, but I don't think he's necessarily wrong, but I wouldn't do it. My only pick with EOTech is the battery life. I go with Aimpoint, despite my astigmatism. Yeah, Aimpoint definitely just better this way. Honestly, I don't have any issues. When I look through an Aimpoint, it looks like a dot, as opposed to like a star cluster kind of thing. There's no holographic portion to it, so it's not as grainy to me. So yeah, let's see. FAL is greater than M14. I would agree. And I know people are going to be all sad about it, but I don't care about people's feelings. The facts are what they are. Sorry. He loves it. No, if that's talking about the M14. M14 equals recoil. That's true. And it's not necessarily the cartridge as much as just you are not in line with the sights in that stock. So anything you do on an M14 or an M1 Garand, you are going to cant and rotate up at the pistol grip at that angular motion. So the geometry is not the same as an AR, where you are in line, plus the design of the gun is in line with the bore, and the sights are higher than the bore to put that deep down in your shoulder, not to mention the recoil of the cartridge is much less. So yeah, night and day, dude. Is 38 Special a great round for revolvers? I guess, I mean, that's kind of open-ended, to be honest. I like to be as specific as we can be. I think if I'm buying a modern double-action revolver, or maybe I just want to be sentimental and buy an 1873 single-action Army kind of deal, I'm probably going to get it for sure in 357 Magnum. And that way I can still do the 357. The whole gun is probably carbon or stainless steel, but most of the time I'm shooting 38 and 38 Special out of most, at least K-frame, moving up to N-frame and everything else, Smith & Wessons. 38 out of a 357 most of the time is pretty gentle, pretty light, pretty fun, easy. And even if you have, like my Model 19 Classic 357, I always have 38 Special plus P in there, super easy to control. Recoil is not a big deal. It's great. So, not a big fan of revolvers. I would actually do a revolver before I did a shotgun. But if we're doing a revolver, or maybe it's just a range toy, a fun gun. Maybe it's cowboy action. Maybe it's whatever. Provided cowboy action allows it. A 357 revolver would be cool because you can shoot 38, and out of that, it's usually pretty soft, pretty chill. So, yeah, I mean, 38 special, it's kind of like 9 mil on a rocket ship. 357, even much more so. So, I mean, it's ballistically, you can get a lot done. Handling and ergonomics, and making shots count, that's kind of a different story depending on what it is. J-frame, Ruger LCR, whatever, a really small revolver in 38 plus P. Not as fun on the recoil side. So, it depends. Are you generally optimistic about the future for the country and the Second Amendment, etc.? I actually am. I am pretty optimistic. The thing is, there are hundreds of millions of guns in our country, even much more ammunition, high capacity magazines. It's everywhere. And the way I look at Second Amendment stuff, even if you have a law that got passed and took effect tomorrow, all guns, ammo, everything is banned. You can't have it. Then we're just sitting in a prohibition kind of thing where it's totally legal, totally commonplace. Everybody has it. Everybody wants it. Everybody's doing it. And then the next day we wake up and it's like totally illegal. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not, I mean, it took some years, but prohibition got repealed. It didn't work. They just gave up. You can't instantly just take away something that there's hundreds of millions of guns, and 1 out of 6 households on average in America, last I checked, has a gun in it. With the Heller versus DC decision back in 2008, it is unlawful to or unconstitutional to ban something in common use. If you've got hundreds of millions of gun cases, I mean, not only is it a matter of logistics and just how widespread it is amongst our country, but if it ever came to a legal challenge at that point, that what I would tell to people who are adamantly about gun control is, I know you have all these cool ideas and stuff, but dude, the cat's out of the bag. It's done effectually. And then with 3D printing, that even if you banned everything tomorrow, you have designs for AR-15s online. People can buy 3D printers. I think a future in the next 20 to 30 years, maybe sooner or so, every American household is probably going to have a 3D printer in it where you can print out knives and spoons and print out, things that you need around the house. And the internet's not going anywhere. And there's designs for guns online. People are going to print them. I mean, there's no way it's over. Like, effectually, they're going to stop trying to do gun control. I'm not saying we're not going to see assault weapons bans or things, but effectually speaking, it's over. It's done. There's no way. The genie's out of the bottle. There's no way to put it back. So in terms of Second Amendment stuff, I'm very optimistic about it because I see it as legally extremely uphill at this point, pretty much impossible with the Supreme Court, the Heller decision. Logistically, definitely impossible. There's no way to, if I was interested in gun control and clamping down on guns, it's kind of over, dude. There's what are you going to do? What can you do? So I'm very optimistic about that. And also, like I've talked about in the past, very optimistic about our country as well. Let's see. Do you like 10 millimeter? 10 millimeter, I think, is pretty awesome if we're chiefly worried about going up to the mountains. We're worried about bears, elk, moose, any kind of four-legged, powerful animal that might, attack us while we're camping. I have everyone from people who go backcountry skiing to backpackers, hikers, people who spend fly fishing, camping, photographers, people who spend a lot of time in the mountains. Usually a Glock 20 is kind of the way to go. If I'm going to rely upon a semi-automatic pistol for defense against a four-legged animal threat, 10 millimeter is definitely 100% the way I would go. And right now, I mean, if you had a 10 millimeter pistol, you can buy. I mean, it's not going to be necessarily cheap, but at least it's plentiful. You could buy whatever 10 millimeter you want. Everywhere I go, between where I work and the other gun shops I look at, just to kind of see how they're doing, 40 cal, 10 mil. I mean, these things are always there. So, 10 mil, pretty outstanding. I will say most modern 10 millimeter loads are very anemic to what the original 10 millimeter auto was made to be. Ammunition manufacturers, not only are they chasing the same FBI standards that they're trying to obtain with 380 or 9 mil, but they also know there's liability. They don't want to blow guns. So modern ammo manufacturers will actually download the 10 mil, kind of make it softer than what it originally was spec'd out and made to be. You can still find it with like Buffalo Bore, huge example of a company that does not give a shit. Like they will make ammo as hot loaded and crazy as possible literally before they blow the gun. And then once they blow the test gun, they will crank it down a couple notches and then sell it to you. So if you really wanted actual old school legit 10 mil, you could buy some Buffalo Bore hardcast lead, something like that. But yeah, I think any caliber that you can readily find at this point, good thing. Ballistics on 10 mil, like 10 mil unleashed back to its original configuration. That's pretty stout. That's pretty stout. I don't know if I would do it as an everyday carry unless it's 2020 Jumanji year and I just want something I can readily find ammo for. I don't care about the cost. I can just find it, train with it, shoot it. But yeah, if I'm looking for a semi-automatic pistol to help me out in the mountains, at least in the lower 48, not including Alaska, yeah, the 10 mil with the right ammo selection, that'd be definitely the way to go. Let's see. What do I think of Colion Noir? I think he's a pretty interesting guy. I've listened to him on Joe Rogan. I think he's been on twice now. I have been watching him for years. I think it's pretty interesting. I guess in some ways, he kind of tainted himself as being a neutral source by the time he spent partnered with the NRA. But I think he is a pretty awesome dude, makes a lot of awesome content, and I watch his videos. So I think he's pretty cool. Red dot or no for EDCs. So are we talking about like a pistol RDS or a red dot on a pistol slide? As you're going to see in the video I drop tomorrow, I don't just roll out the house with a pistol. That's weak sauce. Always going to have a long gun. Always going to have a carbine or a rifle. Always, like facts, guaranteed. Definitely going to be a red dot or some kind of optic on that. But if we're talking about a pistol, if you can just kind of specify that, Lancaster, just let me know, because I definitely have some thoughts on that. I just want to know what you're talking about. Let's see. In a world of pessimistic messages, nice to hear some optimism. Thank you. Yeah, man, I think taking a full inventory of what we're really dealing with, it's not as bad as the talking heads want you to think it is. If you're watching something and they're telling you something and you're not paying for it, you are the product. And I think there's kind of a if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. They're not going to make money pushing news and things that are calm and peaceful and optimistic and happy. It has to be crazy. It has to be tragic. It has to be controversial. It has to stir you up. It has to piss you off. And I think a lot of time we just got to disconnect from that, dude, and just really take an inventory of what we are really dealing with, which is actually quite a good situation. Let's see. What do you think of the 1986 FBI shootout? Paul Harrell had a great video on it. He did. That was a feature-length presentation. We're talking about the Miami-Dade shootout. Just a couple miles from where I'm from in Southern California, we had the Newhall shootout before that. And it seems like every time there's kind of this benchmark, North Hollywood shootout, Newhall shooting, FBI, Miami-Dade shootout, law enforcement has traditionally changed, completely rewrote the book on stuff for better and also worse. It's a continued evolving process in terms of law enforcement, military tactics, everything. Well, obviously, I mean, I'm not happy with the agents or the people who died that day, but it was a pretty benchmark event that changed law enforcement doctrine again for the better and also the worse for a while. I guess borrowing from Clint Smith for a little bit, Miami shootout shows you what someone with a Mini 14 and even a revolver can do for better, and in this case, worse. And poor training, inadequate training, training scars, unrealistic training, not putting the reps in. I think it would surprise a lot of people that there's a lot of cops who are just not actually gun guys at all. Maybe the only gun they own is the gun they're issued, and I just wear this because it's part of the job. But it's such a small part of just because you carry a gun, whether you're a soldier or a cop, doesn't mean you're a gun guy or shit about guns. Just because it's part of your job and you have occasional qualifications once every 4 months or something does not mean you know how to be a functional member of society in a gunfight. And unfortunately, with that shooting, I think there's a lot of proof in the pudding on that. And it's stuff to be studied. It's stuff to remember, but it's also one of those things that, it's a historical event. It did change American law enforcement tactics and applications for quite some time. Moving into the 10 millimeter, that's kind of where that showed up, of course, but it's just one of those benchmark things. And, just kind of one of those things to study, but it's an unfortunate thing, but it did change everything. Let's see, from Lancaster, a pistol RMR. Okay, so talking about red dots on pistols. We've done red dots or holographics on AR-15s, M4s, rifles for quite some time now. And I've even seen some red dots on pistols going back to the 70s as race guns, competition guns. And they were very antiquated, heavy, big. They were not mounted to the slide. They were mounted onto the frame. Some old custom gunsmithing stuff. At least I can remember, there was a serious talk about red dots going on pistols for duty and defensive use dating back to 99, 2000. Took some decades to really start to get there, and now we're kind of moving into it. I have shot a number of pistols. Every now and then I continue to shoot pistols that have red dots on them, from the rentals we have to coworkers' guns to guns I have access to that have red dots on top. I don't want to be a dinosaur. I don't want to be opposed to better technology. And I don't want to be resistant to positive change that can help make us more effective. I've noticed with my shooting with red dots on pistols, it definitely takes a lot, at least for me, it took a lot of reps and a lot of practice, a lot of time, at least 3 or 4 times a week, doing some very deep range sessions to really work with it, really get that presentation and natural point of aim to line up perfectly with seeing the red dot every time. Initially, when you get started, you're like, oh man, did it turn off? Where's the red dot? What's going on? And then you ironically use the iron sights to find the red dot. I think most people, they're not going to put in the practice or reps needed on a red dot on a pistol to really hammer it down. But let's assume you have the ammunition, you're committed, you're willing to put the reps and a lot of training in, and you're not going to be like me jumping around 12 different handguns throughout the month. That you have one handgun, that's just what you're going to carry. It's this gun. I have plenty of ammo. I'm committed to train several times a week and really put in the reps, maybe 500 rounds a month at least, whatever. I've noticed with red dots on pistols, I can be faster and I can be more precise, especially at distance. I do have some concerns. One is battery life. Something like an Aimpoint Acro, not that great. Something like a Delta Point Pro or a Vortex, Venom, or one of the Holosuns, battery lives can be a little better, but the brightness level, out of the waistband or whatever, maybe there's some pocket lint on the glass. Who cares? Maybe it's raining and that kind of sucks too. And you pull it out, maybe it's a dark, cloudy, rainy day and your brightness is like super bright. And now you aim the pistol and you got the star cluster thing going on. Maybe you're a law enforcement officer and you have a red dot on your duty pistol. It's department authorized. And maybe a suspect throws you into the mud and shoves you on the asphalt and just cracks the glass, and now it's all muddy. If I have iron sights, I can swipe the top of the slide and start shooting, still make things happen. If it's a red dot and there's mud packed in there, if it survived a fall on the asphalt and it's not cracked or messed up, maybe there's mud. In this case, out here in Utah, maybe there's snow. You get thrown into the snow on the side of the highway during a traffic stop if you're a cop, and you pull out the pistol and you're looking at this huge snowball on top of your slide, and you don't really have the time to wipe the front and wipe the back and let's hope the brightness is perfect. I'm not saying it's impossible for duty use. Again, I've noticed I'm slightly faster and definitely a little bit more precise when it comes to shooting with a red dot on a pistol. At least for me right now, I'm still in the realm of definitely for competition, 3-gun, range gun stuff. But for duty, concealed carry, defense, I think for me, the jury is still out. I'm not opposed. I just want to see more and see how we can make the technology better, more affordable, extend the battery life, try to deal with some of these challenges. So it's I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. I guess, just depends. Everyone's got a different opinion. Let's see. Do I play any video games out of curiosity? I don't have any consoles. I like board games. I like chess. I do play Company of Heroes. Every now and then. It's been a hot minute since I've played. Anything that involves strategy, real-time strategy, I've always been involved in or liked. There was a time, Call of Duty, the original one, everything else, yeah, but it's been a hot minute since I've really played any video games. I'm either working on, I've got books I'm reading, I've got other things going on, but video games though, I'm not here to say they're all bad. Reflexes, strategy, thinking, communication. There's a lot of positive benefits, I would say, from video games. I don't want to say I don't have the time. It's just, man, things are moving so fast that I just really don't. But I'm not opposed to it, and I don't shit on anybody who plays video games. Why don't we all, I got a question in the gate here. Why don't we all take like a 2-minute break? My phone has been going crazy. It's probably the work group chat that the gun shop is completely overloaded. But I am not in a position to drive. That's a fun fact about Mr. Second Amendment. Even if I've had one sip of adult beverage, I don't drive, dude. It's over. So not in a position to go help out. I'm sorry, team, if you guys are watching right now. But why don't we all take like 2 minutes, use the latrine, go on a bathroom break, and I'm going to get right back with you guys here. Just going to respond on this. All right. Be right back with you guys. Let's take like 2 minutes. But I'm going to keep this rolling. I'll be right back. Okay. I had to put on a little jacket here. Just turn the heater on, so see if we can get the house a little warmer here. Let's see, I'm going to have to put my glasses on to read some of these questions. Going to re-up. Okay, we are back. Zip your pants up and get ready for comment. Okay. All right, so going back, we have, let's see, the last one. Did you say before that you were not a fan of pistol caliber carbines? That is true. I said that. I still feel that way. The way that I look at it is if I have let's say an AR-9, so an AR platform, AR pistol, AR-9 that obviously is chambered in 9mm. For that size and generally that weight-ish, I can just at that point just do a 300 blackout or a 5.56. So for the same size and weight, instead of a pistol caliber, which even out of that barrel is not going to be the same as a 5.56 or 300 blackout out of a 10-inch, 11.5-inch barrel. But I think they have a time and place. It's pretty cool as a training tool, a range toy. Maybe you're looking for home defense for the wife or spouse, and they are a little bit recoil sensitive, size and weight sensitive. Maybe an AR pistol. I don't know. Even then, if I'm taking on the same general size and weight, and it's either going to be a 9mm or a 5.56 or rifle, intermediate rifle cartridge, why the hell not just go for the superior cartridge that can actually give you distance as well if you need and want it, as opposed to sticking with, I mean, unless maybe a Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which the quality on those is not that outstanding. We just got one back from repair. They were pretty quick on the turnaround. They didn't charge us to repair it when it broke again, but you know, that it folds in half and it takes Glock magazines and it's cool. It's like, dude, I know everybody wants to accomplish everything under the sun with Glock mags and pistol caliber. But I'm here to tell you that not everything you'd ever need and want to do can be done with 9mm and Glock magazines. So I don't know. I don't want to go as far to say that I hate pistol caliber carbines or I'm a PCC hater. I'm just going to say that I hate pistol caliber carbines. There you go. And that's just kind of, I don't know, that's just how I feel about it. Who is your favorite founder after Jefferson? What do you think Jefferson would have thought about the AR-15? Definitely James Madison, father of the Constitution. Anybody at that age who could write a document such as that, obviously with input from the Constitutional Convention, plus the life he lived previous to that. Yeah, one of my favorites for sure. Let's see. What do I think Jefferson would have thought about the AR-15? I think the second he saw it, he would want his own. He'd want to get his hands on one. I think he would. I mean, he was, scientific and intellectual, maybe not necessarily mechanical as much, but he would still want to know, how does this work? How are we in a position to shoot multiple rounds in a self-loading kind of fashion? And it's so lightweight, and there's 30 rounds in here, and which is amazing. Sometimes you think, like, going back to the American Revolution or the American Civil War, if you could just like time machine someone in, even a fire team size element with like a 249 saw and a couple M4s with night vision and laser designators and stuff, like, it's like, dude, that literally could have changed the whole outcome of everything sooner or different. So it's I think would have been pretty interesting, but also, Thomas Jefferson doing some time machine fantasy kind of scenario, looking at an AR-15. That was in an age before serial production or interchangeable parts, before Eli Whitney had really started to at least pretend to come up with interchangeable parts. And there was so the fact that you could do that by the million, and I can take parts out of this and put it in that, and everything's cool. I think that probably, that was pre-industrial revolution. That probably would have been just as magnificent to him as the gun itself, is the fact that if you were to show him, like, hey, these are all just, I'll take whatever parts out of this box and put it in, switch them around to 10 other samples, 20 other samples, and they're all going to work just fine. That probably would have blown his mind, just as much as the gun itself. Do you think someday we will be able to buy bump stocks again? I don't think so. Not anytime soon. And bump stocks, kind of recapping on that. I always looked at bump stocks as a range toy. For the time they were legal, I did mess around with some buddies or people who had a bump stock, and they let me shoot it, trying to kind of get it down, work with that recoil impulse and kind of get it just right. And every now and then there'd be a little bit of hammer follow, as in the bolt carrier group is still in the process of chambering that round, but the hammer has already been allowed to discharge, and the hammer is hitting the shrouded bottom piece of the carrier underneath the firing pin, and then it all just chambers the round, and the hammer is just kind of resting, discharged behind the carrier. Bump stocks were never, I don't know, to me it always looked like a range toy. Having experience with open bolt machine guns, being a machine gunner, working with burst and full auto M4s, and then now in civilian life, working with a lot more machine guns. Bump stocks were I could never really get it to be a sure bet, especially if I was actually trying to use it under duress. It would take a lot of practice to really, really be good with that particular rifle outfitted with that particular bump stock. And that's assuming we even want full auto in the first place. Really, if we're trying to get things done, semi-automatic is the way to go. And this goes back to I think it was my second almanac talking about honesty in the AR-15, that in the military, whether it's Marines or Army, combat arms, infantry, 11 Bravo 03 series, pretty much everything you ever do overseas, stateside training, everything is semi-auto. You never really ever put it on that third switch of burst or auto, depending on what you have, because everybody knows you're conserving ammo. You're actually making your shots count, and repeat shots on semi-auto with aimed fire so much better out of a carbine in your hands than burst or full auto. So the bump stock to me from the onset always seemed like a range toy. However, with all that said, we are a nation of laws, or we're supposed to be. And according to the 1934 NFA and the purview of that law, which unfortunately is still the law of the land, the bump stock did not constitute or meet the definition of what is described as a machine gun, according to the 1934 National Firearms Act. So as much as I thought it was a range toy, I didn't see much use for it outside of, hey, this is cool, check it out. I never wanted to see it banned, especially by executive order. And I wish President Trump had been a little bit more in favor of the Second Amendment, which he wasn't. But I wish he hadn't banned them, because the original ruling on the bump stock from the ETF Technology Division branch was that, hey, you may not like it. You can artificially kind of mimic full auto fire, but this, according to the letter of the law, this does not actually constitute a machine gun. There is still one shot happening per one trigger pull. So I don't know what you want to do about it, but we can't re-maneuver the law to fit whatever political. Unfortunately, that's what President Trump did. So I don't see the bump stocks coming back. I would not miss them in terms of a matter of effectiveness. I would only miss it in terms of getting back to the letter of the law, which, again, President Trump decided to not really give a shit about the Second Amendment or the law and just kind of make that happen. So, will it return? Well, Biden, I don't think it's going to be much better. I don't see bump stocks coming back. Let's see. What are laser designators? Something like a PEC 15, PEC 16, Steiner D-ball. The best on the market is the BF Myers, the Maul, but that goes for about $2,500. Most of that is unattainable for most people, but a laser designator is generally going to have a visible setting of a laser on your rifle, but that's not even the beginning. Most of the value that you're going to get out of a PEC 15 or a D-ball or a MAWL, MAWL, is going to be the IR settings. That's going to have an IR laser, an IR illuminator, and if you have nods or night vision, you're going to see that. So visibly, to the naked eye, no one is going to know anything's happening, but you can designate targets. You can put an IR laser on a target and slam it. You can illuminate to see through IR light without using white light. You can do buzzsaw figure 8 to signal UH-60s or birds. You can show others what you are looking at without any white light at all. You can actually aim and shoot the gun without using optics or anything at all, just using the laser totally with no white light, total darkness. So the PEC 15, to me, I always thought was the most valuable piece of equipment on my M4 ever. That was the most important thing I had on the M4 was PEC 15, because I can fight in the night and no one even knows or sees it besides my own team. Most civilians don't have that. They don't have a laser designator. They don't have nods. They don't have anything like that. Most law enforcement doesn't either. So if you have that and nods, you are leaps and bounds above even most law enforcement and anybody in your area, probably. Let's see. What is my truck gun? So again, I keep referencing this video I'm going to drop tomorrow, but I actually go over the several long guns that one of them is going out the door with me every day. Not to spoil it, but of course I have a handgun, and you must be outside your mind if you think I'm leaving the house without a long gun. It's just on the list of things that's not happening in 2020. That's not happening. So I kind of show it in detail. As a side note on truck gun, I do not leave guns in my truck overnight or any vehicle overnight. I don't leave anything overnight in a vehicle. It's something I've touched on in the video that's going to drop tomorrow, but I have actually encountered a very high amount, surprising even to me, high amount of people who are coming into the gun shop and like, oh, our car got busted into last night and they took my everyday carry gun and now I'm here to buy something to replace it in the meantime. I've had a couple Cerakote jobs come in where they finally got it back after a couple years that the police apprehended someone and this was their stolen gun and it got returned to the owner, but it's all rusty or some crackhead criminal gangbanger did some kind of buff job on it and they want to get it recoated. It's pretty surprising to me how many people leave guns in cars overnight and how many of those guns get stolen and how many of those guns actually get used by criminals, end up in evidence rooms, get stolen again, taken to pawn shops just to get acquired by local law enforcement, end up killing people, being used in crime or stick-ups, some kind of armed robberies. I mean, I would not recommend leaving any guns in your car or truck or vehicle overnight at all. So that's kind of a side note on that. I've actually been kind of, even me, I've been surprised at how many people have had stuff stolen out of their car and they had, some kind of pistol, maybe some kind of long gun that they always keep in the car and that thing got jacked out of their car. And now it's out there in who knows whose hands doing God knows what. But mainly in the truck. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but you'll see it tomorrow in the video if you guys watch it. But I do discuss the guns that I'm always going to have on me when I leave my house, and always have access to it. Always leave, outside the proximity of my house. I always take it with me. Always have it. And it's not just one gun; it's actually 3. But you guys will see that. Let's see. I left my drink over there. Going to grab it real quick. 10 seconds. Okay. Let's see. From Bowman, can you use a long gun without a backup handgun? So I think some people would probably be really surprised by this, but that's essentially most of the U.S. military. So I think people will see movies or play Call of Duty or video games where they have like 4 guns, 3 guns, a long gun, and then a backup pistol or whatever it is. It's like the reality is most infantrymen, standard grunts, probably just going to be issued a machine gun or an M4, and that's it. If you're lucky, depending on how many Berettas your unit has, maybe you might get issued a pistol as well. maybe an E6 or someone in your unit might hijack it and take it for themselves and just take it from you. Most of the U.S. military is just one gun, an M4 usually, or maybe you're a machine gunner and that's all you have. So yeah, you can, use long gun without a backup handgun. I see, at least in civilian life, the handgun is easiest. Let's look at law enforcement. They have a duty belt. On that duty belt, they have a sidearm, and that's just always on there with their handcuffs, with their radio, with their nightstick and everything. It's easy for them to walk around, to go in and get some food or coffee, to sit in the patrol car to do stuff, and they're always going to have at least the handgun. But what do you see riding in the car? It's definitely an AR-15 and sometimes a shotgun. Usually at this point, that shotgun is dedicated less lethal or beanbag rounds. For civilians, concealed carry permit, the handgun is the easiest to carry on you. It's the easiest to conceal. It is the easiest thing to have on your person while you're going about your errands and doing your thing throughout the day. Handguns, in the grand scheme of things, compared to rifles and shotguns, handguns are pretty weak. There are people who have been shot almost a dozen times and they drive or walk themselves over to the hospital to survive. And part of that shot placement, but also part of that is, handgun rounds are significantly weaker than what you can get out of a shouldered necked rifle case or shotgun shell that is placed appropriately. And with shotguns, right load, right barrel length, right range. So, I think for most civilians, the handgun is probably the first thing they might have. Having a long gun in the vehicle or accessible to you is something I don't think a lot of civilians really have. Definitely cops have it. Definitely in your home. Hopefully you have some kind of long gun, preferably an AR, accessible to you for defense. But, you can use one gun if that's all you have. But I don't know. I always looked at the handgun as something out of convenience, not something ideal, but it's convenient. So it's on me and I'm just kind of doing my thing, running my errands throughout the day, but not ideal, but at least it's something. But a long gun changes things. Physically, ballistically, there is a very significant difference from maybe the Glock 43 that you have in your pocket and carry everywhere versus an AR-15 with 30-round mags and a 16-inch barrel of 5.56. Very significant difference, but also psychologically, at least some of the situations I've been involved in, when a rifle comes out, that psychologically, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, that psychologically changes the game. And instead of just a pistol, here's a rifle or long gun. It's like, whoa, that's okay. Things have just ramped up. So getting back to the point of the question, can you do a long gun without a handgun? Yes, you can. And that's most of your United States military, even overseas. Not a lot of people get sidearms. Cops, lawful concealed carry civilians, the handgun is the first thing. At least in terms of law enforcement, they use the handgun to get them out of a quick, immediate, random encounter. At least either that's it, or they use it to fight their way back to the AR-15 in their patrol car where they can actually start doing things. But yes, you can use a long gun without a sidearm. That's, most of your United States military right there. Let's see. If you're leaving a firearm in your car, get a gun box for your car that's bolted to your car. That's good advice if you're going to do it. I still, if I go to sleep at, 1 a.m. and I wake up about 8 or 9, that's a pretty serious stretch of time where my vehicle is left completely unattended. So if someone is so motivated to do so, maybe they're not just doing a smash and grab, but they have at least 20 minutes to bring some equipment and try to do stuff, that's still another way to defeat it. At least if they can, I'm just not a big fan of leaving guns in cars when you're not in the car. I'm just not a fan of that. If you have to use a cable lock to lock, through the pistol, the gun to the frame of the car, at least, while you're in a permissive environment or a place where you can't physically carry the gun. I just wouldn't, I don't like leaving guns in cars for an extended period of time or at all if I can help it, if I'm not in the car, because, they can shear off some bolts, they can cut through some cable locks, they don't even have to crack the combo or whatever. They can just grab and go and then worry about it later. I just don't want to leave assets for criminals in my car overnight, every night, or for extended periods of time on the way. Let's see. What do you think of the military's new SIG pistol? So that was one of the cool things I got to do about a year and a half before I got out of the Army, was go to Fort Bragg, do the FORSCOM marksmanship competition, represent our brigade out there. It was a pistol shooter, an M4 shooter, and an M249 saw shooter. It was a 3-man team from FORSCOM. So, from 82nd, from us, 10th Mountain, to other installations. And we got to compete, and I was the pistol shooter. So we had about a week of time shooting a lot of rounds through the M17. And, that was the first year, 2018 at FORSCOM, that the competition involved using the new M17. Overall, I think that the 320 is outstanding. I think that's an excellent pistol. I would refer you to watch the pistol range day video that Range Chris and I did. We shot like 24 handguns. One of them was a 320 that is not the same, but very close to an M17. Outstanding modular design, red dot capability, weapon light capability. You can change out the frames, change out barrel lengths, change out caliber. Unlike a Glock or an M&P or anything like that, the 320 pattern, the M17, the internal portion of it, the fire control unit, is the gun. So that little thing that has, the sear block and the trigger that comes out of the handle, that is the gun. So you can move it into any other frame or handle or anything you want to do. Very reliable. On the rental range, we have about 6 320s that we have for rent. They never break. They don't give us any problems. I never have to mess with them. I don't even have to clean them. Just like the Glocks, they just shoot and do their thing. The only critique I have with the M17, the rear sight is kind of chonky. It's kind of big. You can get different versions of the 320. You can change out the sights. You could put a red dot on top. You could do whatever. So not a big deal. The other thing about the M17 is whatever Sig Sauer did, I don't know if that's Cerakote or some kind of finish on the slide. It was very fragile, so we were doing a lot of holster stuff, firing, several thousand rounds out of these guns over a week. And just 1 week of intensive use, and these slides were looking silver. So I don't know what finish they put on it, but at least coming out the gate, the M17, it's not a very durable finish from what I saw. Bruniton from the M9 Beretta, the Beretta proprietary finish they put on their M9s would not have been like that. The finish that Glock on Gen 4 and Gen 5 they put on their guns would not have been that fragile at all. But you can always, Cerakote stuff, whatever. And you'll see it tomorrow in this video again that I drop, but I don't really care how guns look. I just care how they function and perform. But long-term rust preventative kind of thing, I was a little bit it was a little weird to me that the slide, it was so fragile. I mean, it was getting scratched and silver after nothing. So That's about it. Otherwise, I think the M17 and the SIG 320 at large is pretty good to go. Yeah, if you bought an M17, an M18, or any kind of 320, I would not think that you made a bad choice at all. We're talking about a gun that's definitely going to be around at least for the next 30 years. So, yeah, let's see. Lancaster talking about while riding around, my shit stays with me. True as well. I don't, if I'm not in the vehicle, there's no gun there, lockbox or not. It's not there. So yeah, let's see. Back from Bowman here. If you got done protecting yourself with your firearm, what's next? What happens if that your only self-defense weapon, but they take it for investigation? How do you get it back? So some of that's going to be situation dependent, depending on what state, locality, jurisdiction you live in. I think even living in a very gun-heavy free state, I see a lot of people that automatically think that the courts are going to be on their side. I'm here to tell you that they're usually not. Whether it's USCAA or some other organization that has insurance for concealed carry people, I would not automatically assume the courts are going to be in your favor. Chances are, if you're involved in a lawful self-defensive shoot, whether it's a concealed carry out in the public scenario, in defense of life outside the home, or it's inside the home doing some kind of self-defensive encounter, whatever firearm that you used to defend your own life, automatically assume you're not going to see that gun again. If ever, it'll probably take a year or two for you to even get that gun back. Some states, California, where I come from, even if it's the most legitimate form of self-defense in your home, not only are they going to take the gun that was actually used in the homicide, because it still is going to be ruled most of the time a homicide, but they're going to search or ask you, do you have any other guns? Let's empty out the gun safe. We're going to take everything. So you are going to be completely out of luck on everything. So, I think if you use or have to use a gun to defend your own life and family inside your home, whatever, the gun being used, assume you're probably never going to see that thing again. And if you do, it's probably going to take at least a year or two. That gun's going to be in evidence. There's forensics on it. They still, no matter how justified that self-defense shooting was, they're still going to have to confirm that the bullets in the criminal busting into your house trying to do harm to you, that those bullets came from your gun. There's going to be testing. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. They're going to ATF trace the serial number. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen. It's not something anybody, I wish nobody would be looking for or hoping for or wanting to take part in. But just assume, if you have to use a firearm to preserve yourself or your family in lawful self-defense, that gun, you may not see that gun ever again. And if you do, it's going to take years until they finally give it back to you. And depending on some states, they may take every gun in the house and take everything out of there. So, I've seen it go all kinds of ways. It's really hard, especially on this live stream, to try to cover all bases, because we got people watching from different countries. We got people watching from different U.S. states. There's no way I could possibly cover the laws in every place, and I definitely don't have the legal competency to even attempt to do that. So I would just urge you to do what I do, which is to understand your local laws, understand your state laws, understand the prosecutorial attitude of the state, understand the law enforcement attitude of your sheriff's office or city police or whatever you got. But it's kind of one of those things, pretty open-ended. Let's see. Um, let's see. Have you shot a Mark 48 machine gun before? Yes, I have, and actually, that was the machine gun I had for some time. My first deployment. So when we went to Afghanistan, and Lancaster, who you guys have seen in the comments, he was on that deployment with me. But when we got to Afghanistan, we took over for the Rakkasans, 101st dudes, and they signed over to us what's called TPE, or theater provided equipment. And part of that is radios, trucks, whatever. But part of it was, I think it was 3 Mark 48s. And they had gotten these from the Navy on loan, and the Navy wanted them back. And they had just kind of kept hiding them. They didn't want to give them up. So once we got them, we were kind of keeping it on the lowdown, not really advertising that we had them. But that was the first gun that I took dismounted and mounted in Afghanistan, was a Mark 48 for some time. Still got some pictures of it. If I dig a little bit, I'll easily find them. And then once the Navy discovered that we had them, we had to give them up. And then they gave us 240 Bravos instead, which I was not really a big complaint, except they were heavier. But the gun itself, the 240 Bravo, is an outstanding machine gun. A little bit heavy, but if you are willing to put up with the weight, or have to put up with the weight, 240 Bravo is very outstanding machine gun. But the Mark 48, I liked it because it was basically an M249 saw, but in 7.62 NATO. And it was, for the time that I carried one and had one in Afghanistan, it was pretty cool. Is there a real difference between 308 and 7.62 by 51? There is. Not necessarily, I think, by modern terms, in terms of ammo manufacturers and manufacturers today who are making barrels for AR-10s and things that are 308 Winchester versus the 7.62 NATO. There are differences, but by and large, I think most people, through most rifles that are going to take it, you're going to be generally fine. It's maybe not as critical of a difference between 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO, which there's some very big differences there that do matter. But 308 and 7.62 NATO, I will care about, like, you guys have seen it about a year and a half ago. I first put out my videos about the Ishapur 2A1 that I have. That thing was initially chambered in the 7.62 NATO. It was not designed to or intended to shoot the higher pressure, thinner brass walls of a 308 Winchester. So out of my Ishapur 2A1, dedicated military issue 7.62 NATO rifle, I will never shoot 308 out of it. If I bought something like a SCAR 17, I have a modern production AR-10, I'm going to buy whatever I can and just shoot it and be fine. But older guns like that, or legit military surplus like that, really just want to stick to 7.62 NATO. Especially, at least in the case of the Ishapur, the 7.62 NATO has thicker brass walls in that case. So there's more stretch that's going to happen with the generous headspace on NATO weapons, military weapons usually, where you're going to want that lower pressure and thicker brass to accommodate for that stretch, as compared to the higher pressure and the thinner brass walls of a 308 Winchester, which may not deal with that kind of stress as well in a gun like that. So, but yes, there is a difference. And for anyone who really wants to get in the weeds on the difference between 308 Winchester and 7.62 NATO, or 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO, just buy a reloading manual from Hornady or any company that does ammunition and has a reloading manual, and you will see the different. There might be 4 or 5 different chapters on the 5.56 versus 223. And showing you what the differences are between the weight and size and parameters of the case, to the powder load, to the projectiles, to the overall length. I think that's probably more detail than most people want to hear. So I would just recommend either buy a reloading manual if you really want to see it. Is it true that the ATF uses outdated technology? Yes, actually, that's 100% true. I can't remember if it was the Brady bill back in the 90s. I think it was, but it was introducing the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. It was introducing the ATF Form 4473, the buy a gun, but kind of as an olive branch or a compromise piece to the pro-gun side of the House to get the bill passed. They legally restricted the ATF as to what technology they are physically allowed or authorized by law to use. So ATF is like their tracing center in West Virginia. They are constrained to using old school floppy disks. If you guys see the movies of someone researching a crime or something and they're looking at old newspaper articles and they have the data tech system where like they're just scrolling through and looking at the TV screen as they're scrolling through the microfilm and looking for stuff. That's literally right now what the ATF uses. Floppy disks, the old microfilm technology, they are not allowed to have databasing. They're not allowed to use even Microsoft Excel for serial numbers, names, calibers, guns, whatever. When they are conducting an ATF trace or they're looking through, multitudes, like at this point, just rotting stacks of 4473s over decades of transactions, they cannot data bank it. They can't scan it and computerize it. There are actual legal restrictions on the technology they're allowed to use. And if you went to the ATF tracing center and actually looked at how they were trying to do it and what they were doing, you would think you went back to like the late 70s or early 80s. Like they are not able, legally to use computer data banking and databasing and all that. They're just not. There's been some, unofficial debate of like, well, they're still going to follow that, at least by appearances, but are they secretly databasing it? Do they have like some secret Jason Bourne, portfolio or dossier of like, different gun owners and what guns they know or think you have? Like, I would be very hard pressed to think that would be a reality. Even with the 1934 National Firearms Act registering machine guns, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, things like that, the ATF to this day, even right now, is still attempting to accurize their registry of registered transferable full auto machine guns. They don't even know exactly who has what and where it is and what's even going on with the 1934 NFA registry. So yes, we're dealing with, the rumors you've heard or something like they are kind of using outdated technology. That's 100% true because they legally cannot use modern stuff. If that answers that question. Let's see. Lancaster says M240 is a bitch to hump around, but it's all worth it when it's time to rain hell. It's true. Yeah, 240. 240 we have at work. The 240s I dealt with in the Army. It's a very robust, very rugged gun. It's not going to have a lot by way of, chances to fail. And that's kind of the bottom line when it comes to the 240. It's heavy. It's a billet steel receiver, with the Browning, BAR internal piston and bolt design. It has some pretty heavy duty barrels. It's a heavy gun, but the 240, it doesn't ask for a lot. It doesn't really need top, meticulous maintenance, it just shoots, and if you're feeding it rounds that are all sandy and dirty, it's still going to shoot them. It takes a lot really to make a 240 jam or go down. Those are very good guns. I heard that the Mark 48 sounds like a monster when shooting it rapidly. I still have some helmet cam of me shooting the Mark 48 that I had in Afghanistan. I'll see if I can maybe pull that up or something at some point, but it's really honestly, I've shot the M60, I've shot full auto M14s, I've shot the 240 Bravo and Lima, I've shot the Mark 48, I've shot MG 42. From a sound perspective, at least on all the 7.62 NATO open bolt weapons, it's pretty much the same. I don't know. It's going to just be loud as fuck. That's just kind of how it is. Did the U.S. Army Rangers train in martial arts? I can't speak on that for certain. I don't know. I know at least they're probably all at least combatives level 1 or 2 certified at least. But I don't think the Rangers are going to be some like Karate Kid dojo or something where everyone is like a black belt kind of dude. What makes the Rangers dangerous is the fact that they are most of them have at least an associate's or bachelor's. Most of them were or could be or have the capacity to be college or professional athletes. So they're smart, they're physically fit. There was a pretty staunch selection process for them to even get there. They have a lot of training, they have a lot of funding, they have a lot of high-speed equipment, and that's, I think, what makes them the most dangerous or the most capable, at least with the Rangers that I've worked with and trained under. They seem to have a very can-do attitude, and the things they're able to do and not really think a big deal of it, for them, it would be a tremendous deal for your standard 11 Bravos, because standard 11 Bravos in a line battalion are not going to be dealing with that quality and level of soldier by and large. So I think that's mainly what would make them dangerous. I don't know. Martial arts, I don't know. The Marines have what they call MCMAP. It's their kind of basic martial arts kind of thing. I actually think Army combatives is probably superior to that. And I'm sure probably they're all probably at least combatives level 1 or level 2, but also you're going to have guys who did wrestling, boxing, football, rugby. There's probably going to be a lot of guys in Ranger Bat that have played contact sports, that have training, or maybe they do it on their own. They do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on their own. They do other stuff on their own. So I don't know. That's not a question I guess I'm able to answer. Let's see. Did I ever get to shoot an M134 minigun in the Army? Nope. No, I never did. The Rangers we had that were living on the other side of the fob from us, my first deployment, they had them, and you could definitely hear them when they were training or shooting with them. But I never personally got to shoot a 134. Mechanically, it's a very interesting gun, especially the modern ones that have a clutch on them. But I never got to personally shoot one. But what's my opinion on Olight? I know that it's not going to be a very educated opinion. 100% of what I do is going to be Surefire and Streamlight, mainly Surefire. I've never really felt a need to go elsewhere, but I know that about half my coworkers have Olights on their guns. I've always kind of seen them as not as modular, kind of blocky, heavy. Not something that I would personally want. I was not I've never really been as impressed with the candela or the lumens on it. When, after hours, after we've cleaned up the range, 10 o'clock at night, we can turn off all the lights and do some no light training. And a Surefire, even my X300 on my carry gun versus one of my buddy's O lights on his rifle, it's like, dude, that's night and day. But I don't want to shit on the brand just because I don't have a personal opinion as much. I just only know what I've seen, and I have no justification or reason to jump away from Surefire. So I don't know. For those guys who enjoy them and use them, cool. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not opposed to product testing it. If one of my dudes let me borrow one of theirs, but I'm too happy with Surefire to really jump away. So I don't know. I'm sure it's better than trying to use the camera light on your phone to clear your house or something. I'm sure it's better than that, but I don't know. Let's see. I know you said that you love the 50 caliber machine gun. It seems to be well liked in the Army. What makes it so well loved? Well, it's kind of interesting because the Ma Deuce of 50 cal, the M2 machine gun. It's been in service since 1934 with no end in sight. I think some of it has to do with the caliber, the 50 Browning machine gun, the 50 BMG. That's a hell of a drug. That's no slouch. That's a pretty serious caliber. 50 cal machine gun's interesting because it doesn't have a gas system. It's a short recoil operated system. The 50 cal itself, it takes with the M2A1, which finally, after many decades of service during the global war on terror, we finally got an Alpha 1 improvement or designation on the M2, where at least as the operator, you don't have to set the headspace or timing. But the 50 cal, at least the ones we encountered as TPE or theater provided equipment, where as the operator, you do have to set the headspace and then the timing. It takes a little bit of finesse and mechanical understanding on how to set the gun and use it, but 50 cal, as long as the headspace and timing is on point, it's cleaned and has a lot of lubrication, that gun is just going to run. I mean, there's not a lot that can really go wrong on an M2 50 cal, and the results, the terminal effects, downrange effects of the 50 cal are pretty extreme. And if you have a 50 cal gunner who knows what he's doing, headspaces it and times it, lubricates it, takes care of it, stacks his rounds, and knows how, machine gun theory, and knows how to use that gun, the 50 cal is something very different. And so that's probably a reason why, but I don't see the 50 cal, the M2 Ma Deuce machine gun, I don't really see it going away anytime soon. Let's see. I know that I said this last stream, but I'm really looking forward to your big Constitution Almanac. I really feel that those almanacs are important. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I know when I do an almanac, especially if I do like a 40-minute special kind of summing up the Constitution, I know it's not going to get a lot of views. I know it's not going to be as popular as some of my other videos, but I also will sometimes do videos specifically because it's something I want to do or I feel is important, or at least a snapshot in time as a reference point that needs to be said, even if not as many people are really going to tune in. So yeah. Have you seen the A10 Warthog, or I guess we can call it the Thunderbolt 2? Yes, I have, and it's pretty awesome. The thing about the A10 is it, as the story goes, but it's true. I mean, they designed I think it was the GAW. I can't remember what the designation was for the 20 mil cannon on there. But they basically designed the gun and they said, okay, let's see, who can make an aircraft, build it around the gun. Fairchild ended up with the winning design, and it's kind of a close air support, ground combat, tank buster kind of aircraft. A-10 is not fast. It's not supersonic. It doesn't have afterburners. It's not like an F-15 or something. But that's not its role. Its role is to support ground combat, which it does really well. It utilizes depleted uranium shells. That's U-235 and 238 mixed in. I guess you could say both technically. So, that's about almost 2 times the weight of lead. I mean, these are pretty heavy projectiles with a radioactive signature, and they just land. I think it's at least 1,100 rounds a minute-ish on that cannon. It actually slows down the forward thrust and airspeed of the airframe when it's shooting. It's there's really nothing like it, and I've been sad to see that the Air Force has continually tried to retire it. And time again, the Department of Defense and Congress says no. Unless you have a valid replacement, which you don't, it stays. And we are just going to continue to retrofit the shit out of it and continue to bring it up to speed and repair it. But it's not going away. And actually, that was one of the last things Senator McCain did before he passed away, was part of the Armed Forces Senate Committee, was literally like smacking the Air Force PP and saying, you are not getting rid of this aircraft. So stop. So, A-10 got another 15 years of extended life. Pretty outstanding aircraft. It can take a lot of damage and still land, kind of in the spirit of a B-17 or B-24 kind of deal, where it can take a lot of damage and continue to make it home. There was a female pilot that they got, her A-10 got all kinds of shot up over Iraq, and there's still photos of it. You can look at it. I forgot her name, but she landed, and it's like half the elevators and one of the rudders was totally missing, and she just was able to land with all this flak anti-aircraft gun damage. It's like, yeah, because this thing is a tank. So I think it's an awesome airframe. I hate to see that the Air Force doesn't really give a shit about it, but anyone who's a grunt or a gravel agitator or 03 or 11 Bravo series, we love the hell out of that thing. So I hope it never goes away. What do I think of the new Army's camo? A hell of a lot better than ACU. ACU was a dumpster fire. It should have never happened. It was multicam from Cryo Precision that became the K2 or the Scorpion pattern. There's actually a dude I've seen on YouTube who has like a storied history of every camo pattern from U.S. military use to other nations and stuff. And I wish I remembered his name. I'll give him a shout out here, but definitely better than ACU. ACU was absolute trash. Biggest mistake ever. Should have never happened. Multicam, Scorpion pattern. Yeah, that's where it's at. All right, Lancaster, we'll see you. Let's see. Why doesn't the Army use the actual black tip M995 armor piercing ammo? That's a good question. Probably deals with production and cost, and also barrel life and eating up feed ramps and putting more stress on the barrels and the weapons than you might actually need. We had, at least my first deployment, we had a ton of black tip for my Mark 48 and 240. I would always stagger that up with tracers, always as like the first 20 rounds going in. It's just tracers and AP going in. But in terms of, the M4, or basically the AR-15, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure. But then again, when you have something like M855 Alpha 1, you're already doing pretty well. So accuracy sucks, but penetration and velocity and bullet construction is pretty outstanding. So maybe don't have as much a need as you maybe once did. I don't know. What legal way can you defend yourself from a cop? What happens if a cop wants to shoot you in an illegal way? And can you defend yourself by the way a hood cop who was just a bad man in a badge with a badge? Yeah, I don't know how they answer that. The bottom line is if there is any kind of police brutality or injustice by police, for anyone of any class, of any race or ethnicity or any situation, my number one thing is, I know that you feel butthurt and you feel sad, and maybe you have actual grounds for a civil lawsuit at least. Maybe there's criminal charges of misconduct here. Maybe something really awful is happening to you that should not be happening as part of this traffic stop or as part of the conduct of this police officer. The place to fight that is in court, and it's not on the street. And this kind of reminds me of one time I got pulled over in Virginia, and I was going like 10 over, and they pulled me over on 81, the highway out there. And the cop was very brand new. And I had like 5 guns in the car, 1 in the console, 1 on my waistband. There's like guns for days. It was like a rolling National Guard armory in my truck. And not the first time I've been pulled over with guns in the vehicle, not the last time. But the cop, I could tell, looked like the dude was pretty new. And everything seemed okay till I said, hey, just officer, for your safety, I've got a gun here, I've got a gun here, I've got a gun there, I've got 2 in the back, and I've got 1 back in the toolbox. And there's like 600 rounds of ammo in this thing. And instantly the guy was like, like I could tell he was nervous and everything. And he's like, okay. I could like he kind of held on to his gun. I'm like, and I just had my hands at 10 and 2. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And he's like, okay, I need your license and registration. And I was like, my vehicle registration and insurance is in the glove box, and my wallet is in my back pocket, which I'm sitting on, which is right in the pathway to get to my gun. And for my own safety, I don't feel comfortable getting any of it. So I will do, if you want me to get out of the car, if you want to put me in cuffs and grab my wallet or whatever you got to do. But I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to grab it. I want to comply. And maybe this is just being me, but it looks like I just don't want to get shot, because you definitely have no reason to fear for your life. But I'm feeling a little weird right now for my life. So whatever you want me to do, you can cuff me up, and I don't care what happens here, but I am not reaching for any of this shit, because I could tell things changed, and I'm not. You tell me what you want me to do. I'll step out. You can take the gun out of my holster. I don't even care, but I am not reaching for that. I'm not doing it. And that's what we did, and everything ended up okay. But when you're the bottom line, the logistics of the situation is you are dealing with someone who has a gun, who deals with a lot of shitty people all day, every day. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you're about. They don't know what's going on. So if you are in that kind of metric where you are a person of interest or a potential suspect, or maybe they have probable cause, or it moves beyond a Terry stop and they're more interested in you than just seeing you on the street, and they have a gun and they deal with a lot of shitty people, they've probably maybe been shot at, they've maybe swapped paint with criminals and gangbangers, they've had to deal with shit, they don't know who you are. It's probably the wise thing to do to not be an idiot and to understand, like, hey, maybe this guy is twisting my arm. Maybe this guy is doing some like Rodney King shit. Maybe this is awful. The place and time to deal with this is not right now in the streets, because I'm not trying to get fucking shot. The place where I can sue for redress is going to be in the courts, and maybe I'm going to end up with like $3 million, and this guy's going to get fired or go to jail. That's fine. But at least for the next 20 minutes, let's not get shot. That's one guy's perspective. Nobody has to take that. Just looking intellectually at this, there's a time and place for everything, and the place to hold open public court is not on the streets with maybe a brand new cop with a gun pointed at your face. Like, maybe that is not the time to do that. But I'm not a scientist, so that's kind of, I guess we kind of went on a divergent there. Let's see. Do you think that it would be harder to argue for the legalization of armor-piercing ammo or machine guns? Probably machine guns. I mean, machine guns are actually legal. Armor-piercing ammo is not, depending on the caliber. But deregulating machine guns or repealing the NFA probably going to be tougher than making a case for armor-piercing ammo. And honestly, the dudes I know who have been hit by different types of calibers and rounds who were wearing either, the pancake Velcro stuff, the level 3 or the level 4 ESAPI plates, even if it didn't go through the body armor, you're not having a fucking good day if you get hit by something in your plate. It actually hits you in the plates and it stops it. Just imagine, just stand here like this and have your buddy just take a sledgehammer and just hit you in the chest with it. Like, you're not having a great day. You might be breaking some ribs or, internal bleeding. So I don't know. That's kind of a side note on that. But I think fighting to deregulate machine guns as opposed to not caring about armor-piercing ammo. Armor-piercing ammo would probably be an easier ask. Not that either are easy. A bad man with a badge you can shoot back. No, I honestly, I can't foresee a situation where I would be such an idiot or such a public nuisance to cause the ire of law enforcement to not only draw on me, but start actively shooting at me. I still would be hard pressed I just don't. Yeah, that would be pretty hard for me to. The way I conduct myself when I deal with law enforcement as part of a traffic stop, or the times that I've been contacted by or interacted with law enforcement in an actual encounter, the way I conduct myself, what I'm doing with my hands, and actually following what it is they might be directing me to do, not giving up my rights, not admitting to anything I don't have to, not allowing for search of my vehicle without a warrant or probable cause or whatever it is, but at least conducting myself. I've never been in a situation where I've even gotten that far that guns are drawn on me or being in some kind of engagement with police. So I would never, again, any problems that I would have with cops, I'm fighting those battles in court. I'm going to win if it got that bad. So that's, I don't know, just one guy's opinion. See, did you say that you had a BRC shop in your gun store? Black Rifle Coffee. That sounds really cool. There's not much more American than guns, coffee, and cigars. Yeah, we had the Black Rifle Coffee shop inside the gun shop at Ready Gunner in Orem, Utah. And yeah, let's see. I heard that George Washington was interested in coffee. I'm sure he probably was. One of the coolest places you can go to in Virginia is Mount Vernon. That's his original estate on the original grounds. They kind of have a living history situation there. It's not the full property, but a lot of it is still there with the farmland. They have living history, people working the blacksmith shop, tending to the crops, guiding you through his house where him and his wife slept, and their dining room, their bedroom, their house, their ice shelter, where even in the summertime they would have ice that they could pull out for drinks and stuff. Pretty good piece about the slaves that George Washington, Martha Washington owned, and how that looked at the time, what they did once he died, what did Martha Washington do, and how did that look? All parts of American history, good and bad. But but I don't remember discussion about coffee as much there. But also, the current estate of George Washington Mount Vernon is kind of reduced in size to the land he actually had at the time, but it still is the original house, and farmhouses and everything is still there. So it's pretty top recommendation besides Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's house. So whether George Washington or not was really in the coffee, I imagine it's totally possible. I don't know personally. Let's see. I noticed that the American flag is also facing the direction of soldiers going in the U.S. military. I don't think other countries do that on their military uniforms. Not that I know of. I've traded patches with French soldiers, British soldiers, the Finnish in Iraq. The Finnish soldiers and the German soldiers were pretty legit. Every soldier I've ever worked with, NATO partner allies, the Czech dudes, the Finns, the Italian dudes, the Germans, the British, they always just had their flag. That was kind of it. So I think we're probably the only country that has on your right shoulder is the American flag. And in times of war, it's DOD policy. That flag is going to be what would appear to be reversed, but really it's as if you're running with the flag. So the blue field is actually, the Union is on the right side as you're running with the flag, imagine, if you will. So yeah, I don't know of any country that does that. And the flags, I have upstairs patches of different country flags I've traded. I don't think they do that. Yeah. Let's see, from Michael, we got a no. So your ARs all have quad rails. Do you just prefer them due to your familiarity and their simplicity? Any plans to get fancy, slim M-LOK stuff? That's an interesting question. And I keep referring, for those who just joined us, I keep referring to the video that's going to drop tomorrow where I showcase some of my ARs that I just use as part of my systems. And they do have the Knights quad rail. And I tell people, you'll see it tomorrow, but I tell people like, hey, this is not the latest and greatest. I don't recommend it. Quad rails, pretty much kind of a thing of the past. They're not weight efficient. They're not as useful to most people as M-LOK slim rail, 15-inch M-LOK would be for you. I would not recommend it. Really, for me, it's more of a nostalgia build, nostalgia kind of stuff. Yeah, having quad rail in 2020, if you're doing it, you're either horribly misguided or you're doing it for nostalgia purposes, which is why I do it. Other than that, you can do so much better with M-LOK, free-floated rails. I really like BCM's rail, Aero Precision, the Atlas R and S1. I think those are great rails for the money as well. SLR, they do a great M-LOK rail. I would stick to M-LOK, not key mod. And I really would advise people to not do the quad rail at all. And again, for me, that's nostalgia. That's what I'm used to, kind of going for that look. And my M4 clone build is using some of the parts I actually took on one or both deployments. Part of that being the quad rail. But getting back to the point, yeah, I would not recommend people to do that unless they're doing a clone build or for nostalgia. But if you're actually trying to make a lighter weight, more useful and practical rifle with what you have, I would not do a quad rail of any kind. I just wouldn't. So that's a pretty good question, but you'll see that as well tomorrow if you guys watch the video. It's going to drop where I showcase the two ARs I have that's got quad rail, and it's not in 2020. Absolutely not what I would recommend anybody to do. Let's see. I drink my coffee black with nothing in it, just plain black coffee. Do you? I do. The only addition is a couple cubes of ice. I don't like coffee that's piping hot. I'll even drink coffee room temperature, but it's always black. Yeah, I don't do the creamer, sugar, milk, anything like that. Just black. Throw some ice in it if it's fresh off the press. If you were to meet Thomas Jefferson right now, what would you say to him? I don't think I would say anything. I think I would listen. Sorry to get all deep on you guys, but I think I would try to show him kind of what has happened, where we're at now, and I would just listen and see kind of where that conversation would go. But I would not be in a rush to say things to him. I would be in a rush to listen and answer whatever questions he would have, because I would not even know where to start to backfill him on everything that's happened. I would have some questions about some of the personal decisions he made. But honestly, it'd be less about what would I have to lecture him about. It'd be more answering his questions and listening to what he would have to say. Let's see. Looks like we got Miss Texas coming home. What's up? Still doing the live stream. So why don't we take a little 2-minute break? You guys go take a bathroom break, grab some drinks. I'll be back. Still going to be doing this for a little while longer. So we'll be right back. I'm going to keep the live stream going. Reload on some drinks. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, work was good.
Yeah. Smells like Christmas in the house.
And now I got that wax melter going.
Yeah. It's like Google Lucky's wax melt.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Good. I'll probably do this for 20 or 30 minutes. Okay. All right. We are back. Miss Texas just came back from work, so a little bit of a hello there, and we're just going to keep trucking. I think we're going to stay for probably about 20 more minutes, guys. So if you have any more questions, let's keep moving into that. Let's see. Forgive me, Mr. 2A. I'm essentially just coming up with questions as I go. So, yeah, that's fine. That's what this is all about. Have you read Steve Halbrook's books about the Second Amendment? I have not. But it sounds like something maybe I'll look at. Thanks for the answer. I'll watch your vid tomorrow, going back to the quad rail. Yeah, you should. And we went post-production with that this morning. So just getting all the footage on that. You'll see what I said about it. I went into more detail here about quad rail, but I guess if it's quality, durable, functional equipment, even if it's outdated, you're still going to do better than the cheap Chinesium garbage that you could buy today that looks cool, but it's not durable. So the stuff I have is durable and well made. It's just kind of obsolescent, antiquated, older. So yeah, you can definitely do better. And that's inventory has kind of been an issue as of late, but Range Chris and I have been really talking about the Black Bess Musket project, which is going to incorporate some modern stuff in a modern AR-15 that is still going to be durable, quality, that's going to get things done that you need. That's not going to have quad rail. Let's put it that way. Let's see. We need to change the 17th Amendment, as you said last stream. Why did this amendment happen in the first place? Well, for starters, I have disagreements with the 17th Amendment that the senators, this is referring to the senators being elected by the constituents rather than the state legislatures, kind of cutting the legs underneath the 10th Amendment and state representation. I would at least at a minimum like to see a serious look or study into the effects of it. What would the effects be if we changed it or repealed the 17th Amendment? I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. And it's kind of hard because everyone watching this right now, everyone alive, we were never in a position to be under, or in a country that didn't have the Second Amendment, or the 17th Amendment. So I don't know what that night or day difference looked like. I just, from a states' rights 10th Amendment perspective, repealing the 17th Amendment would make more sense to me. But I'd like to see more kind of arguments for and against. I'm all about debate, intellectual honesty, moving ideas across and having to defend ideas you have, and actually be educated and knowledgeable about the stances you have, and not just because someone told you to. So I'd like to hear some kind of arguments. I could make some arguments, but we're all just future Americans that are living past the 17th Amendment, trying to argue to do it or not. What?
America, fuck yeah.
Yeah, Team America World Police. We had a Lithuanian exchange cadet as a roommate one semester when I was at VMI. It was my second class year or junior year of college. And he was really smart, really strong, really awesome guy too. And he was a fast learner, and his English capabilities were okay. But by the time he left, they were awesome. But to introduce him to American culture, like the first movie we showed him, like the second night that he was in, was Team America World Police, of course, by the South Park crew. And I don't know what he thought of it at the time, but the rest of that semester, and even to this day when we still talk, his name was Tom. So I'd always be like, fuck yeah, Tom. And he'd be like, fuck yeah. So that movie's always near and dear to my heart, kind of as a side note. Let's see, have you been to the Knob Creek machine gun shoot in Kentucky and the Big Sandy? No, I've not been to either of them. As a side note, yes, I'd like to go, but two, it's probably from 3 or 4 years ago, but Vice, of all people, did a dispatch or a video special on sending one of their hipster barista reporters to I think they went to the Big Sandy down in Arizona. And it was not an anti-gun hit job. It was not trying to characterize gun owners or class 3 transferable machine gun owners as crazy people. It was actually a pretty cool thing. And I think it's still on YouTube if you look it up. And I think it's pretty awesome. I'd like to go someday. That'd be cool.
Dollywood, since we're going to Kentucky. Yes.
Isn't that in Tennessee?
I thought it was
Pretty sure it's in Tennessee.
it's important.
Okay.
Yep. Never mind, sorry.
I heard that the Second Amendment is very unique in this world. No other country really has it. Our country as a whole is quite unique in this world. Yeah, like I've said on multiple almanacs and live streams, I think United States, we have a very unique founding story. We didn't get here through being passive and whatever. It literally was out of the blood and the screaming and death of war to get here. And it took a lot of work. Not every time was perfect. There's a lot of atrocities and horrible stuff in our history, but there's a lot of good stuff too. And in the end, it's a country I feel is very unique. I feel like we have a unique history. No country before or since has been founded with the same ideals of the Enlightenment and the natural rights of man, with John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and everything to get us here. And the fact we are still doing this on our second constitution that is still the law of the land today. No, we don't get it right, and we definitely have some things we got to fix. But all in all, I think we're doing pretty damn good, and we have quite a lot to take inventory on. But yeah, other countries' gun ownership, it is purely for hunting or purely for sport or purely for only those who are credentialed and licensed, or the guns have to stay at the gun range or whatever it is. It's very few and far between that there's other countries that kind of view individual citizen firearm ownership like we do. and I would say there's no one else like us that takes it as hardline as we do, for the reasons we do. But there's others that sort of get there, come close. Okay. What do you think about the Army replacing ACOGs with those SIG low power variable optics? This is before you jumped in, but earlier we actually did. My Afghan platoon medic jumped in and he asked about the ACOG. Bottom line, I think it's a great decision. I think it's awesome. For the time, the ACOG was kind of the best thing since sliced bread. The 4x32, forged aluminum housing, indestructible optic, a little bit heavy, fixed 4-power. I think the Army generals and the Pentagon people were happy about it because it was increasing qualification scores and increasing hit probability, but and also magnifying your view so you could positively identify what is out there, whether it needs to be shot or not, or even just using it as a piece of observation equipment. But having a fixed 4-power with at least the 4-power ACOG has a very short eye relief compared to a low power variable optic. Being able to crank that thing from 1 power all the way out to 8 power or 6 power, I think it has a lot of value, and I think it's a step in the positive direction. Things like the ACOG, in some ways you might even be able to include the EOTech in there. Definitely the LCAN Spectre. These things are kind of, at the time, they were awesome. There was nothing kind of else like it. These days, decades later, continual improvement is a good thing, especially when we're talking about going from a fixed short eye relief magnification battlefield optic that's heavy to a variable magnification optic. It's a better place to be in. So I support that decision, but I'm still a little bit skeptical that the Army is not going to find a way to mess it up. And I'd like to see the front sight bases go away, free float rails, MLOT capable, Delta 18 series, Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, they're already, USASOC and SOCOM are already doing it. I'd like to see that for standard 11 Bravos and combat arms, but we'll kind of see how that transition takes place. But I think overall it's a good thing. Are we the militia, or are they talking about state militias? At the time, kind of moving through the context of the 18th century to now, the militia was literally every fighting age male, from teenagers to moving into your 40s and 50s. You had to furnish and provide your own guns and ammo. It was just kind of a duty, a responsibility, an expectation that you would have guns and be capable, at least as a matter of defending your township or community or town. But the concept, in a country such as ours, of individualism, bootstrapping, self-sufficiency and capability, we the people was kind of the thing. Looking at the text of the Second Amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Notice it didn't say a government-mandated army, the federal army, which was constitutionally limited at the time. It didn't say the government or a state governance. It was the people. So I fail to see how confusing that can be to some people or some individuals, that, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. That was not talking about the federal national government. That was not talking about a state mandated whatever. That was us. So, especially understanding who wrote it, why they wrote it, and the time they wrote it in, and literally looking at the words and what they say and mean. I struggle to see the confusion there for those who would say it's the government giving itself the right to have guns and stuff. I don't know. How do you celebrate Independence Day? Do you do anything unique? We definitely do fireworks, Definitely have a good time.
We do
And
fireworks.
yeah,
Just so monotone like that.
we do a lot of fireworks.
We do a ton.
So this particular last 4th of July, we did a number of fireworks, and we went through a couple fire extinguishers, making sure everything was safe and everything like that. But yeah, it's something, I like people to get together, barbecue, do some fireworks, hang out as neighbors, family, friends, especially in a pre-COVID environment. But I also would hope that people would just remember the fireworks are symbolizing, the rocket's red glare. It's symbolizing battle. We didn't get here by barbecuing and shooting off fireworks. We got here through some serious fight.
I wouldn't be called Miss Texas if I didn't shoot. Just that.
Yeah, she says she wouldn't be Miss Texas if she didn't do any shooting. Yes. Yeah, that's something we need to do some more range time when ammo becomes a thing again.
Yeah.
We need to get back on the range and do more. But yeah, she does. I think she has like 6 or 7 guns that she owns. And, she's definitely not afraid to go shooting.
It's fun. You go do that, and then you go to a restaurant. That is go shoot some firearms, you smell freedom, and then you get to go and eat some numbers. Like margaritas and tacos. It's great.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard that, but she said the perfect date is going shooting and then having margaritas and tacos at the end of it, which is awesome. Do I have any full auto guns? No, I personally don't. I work for, an FFL where we have SOT guns, we have transferables, we got dealer samples, we have everything from an MP7, MG42, 249, 240, MP5, full auto AK, M16, M4, RPK. We're working on a PCAM right now. So I don't personally own any full auto or transferables, but at least I work at a gun shop and a dealer where we do that and we rent them out. And it's definitely an interesting experience working with different guns like the MP7 and the MG42 that I never had any exposure to when I was in the Army. And seeing how they work, keeping them running, attempting to order spare parts for guns that are either old. We have a PPSH, it's a PPS 43 technically, and that thing, it's pretty maintenance heavy, but that kind of moves into a different discussion of having to build functional, safe, working full autos from torched receivers and parts kits, as opposed to how they actually were perfectly running fine out of the factory. So it's kind of an interesting experience getting on the phone with HK US Division in Columbus, Georgia, trying to order parts for guns they don't sell to anyone really, and finding parts for older guns. Sometimes it can be challenging. Also, the expense, pretty expensive. M249, I had to order some more parts for that. Just the extractor for an M249 was $212. So it's a pretty expensive passion, if you will, at least the way it is now. See, what do you think of the idea of national animal being a turkey? I'm glad we went with the bald eagle. Can't bear with the thought of eating our national animal on Thanksgiving. Yeah, from what I remember, Benjamin Franklin, when they were proposing all these ideas, wanted our national animal to be a turkey. And I think it was George Washington that stepped in and said, no, we need to make it the bald eagle, which obviously is what we went with in the end. But I don't know. It's kind of is what it is. I don't know. But I'm going to give you guys the last couple minutes here. Got some final questions. Then we're going to wrap this up. The next Q&A live stream is going to be a week from now, next Wednesday, same time, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So if you guys have any questions, we got a couple minutes here. We'll just kind of wrap it up. But as usual, and as always, thank you guys for being here. And hopefully you guys had a good time, got to ask whatever you wanted. And hopefully I was able to answer your questions. We had questions. This is what I love about this. Questions about the mechanics of firearms, legal stuff, political stuff, military stuff. I mean, margaritas and tacos showing up at the end there. We've had a lot of different questions about a lot of different things. So I think that's always cool about this. But yeah, I'll give you guys a couple minutes, last questions. And again, next time we're going to meet, it's going to be 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time next Wednesday, a week from now. Wednesday is kind of the Q&A night. So getting you guys through the week. Looking forward to seeing you do some shooting videos. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to get a little tough. Challenges right now are the weather is starting to become winter. So doing outdoor shooting videos like Range Chris and I have done with the rifles and pistols, going to get a little tougher or impossible to do, not to mention the ammo apocalypse and sourcing ammunition to do videos with becomes a little bit more challenging. So trying to do what we can. I have a couple interesting ideas in terms of videos that I'd like to do, but we'll see where it goes. But yeah, at the end of the day, we try to bring the content that we can. A little bit tough and expensive right now, but we're trying to work through it. Well, looks like that's about it for tonight. So thank you guys for all being here. And again, I'll see you guys for the next Q&A that's going to happen a week from now. We're going to make it every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's when we're going to do it. Thanks, USA Patriot. Appreciate the stuff there. And yeah, this is what the First Amendment is all about. That's kind of a whole side note of expressing yourself on privately owned platforms like YouTube. Where does the public utility argument show up compared to the private enterprise thing? Maybe we'll deal with that next week. But yeah, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. And I'll see you next week. Again, tomorrow I'm going to drop a video that I kept referencing throughout the night tonight, but I think you guys are going to like it. Maybe some things you can take away. Maybe some things are not going to necessarily apply. But I think you guys are going to like it. So we're going to go ahead and end it here. But thank you guys for watching.